Thank you. Good evening and welcome to you all. My name is Natalie Kukai and I'm the Governance Officer this evening. I'd just like to run through the protocols for the hearing this evening. Only speak when invited to by the Chair. If you wish to speak, please do so, raise your hand and do it through the Chair. Please ensure that all your mics are muted when you're not speaking. And when speaking, please be succinct and do not exceed the allocated time frames. If referring to any written submissions, please refer to the specific page number in the agenda pack. Any new evidence can only be submitted at the discretion of the Chair and the agreement of all parties. If you're having any technical difficulties, for those who are online, please do not use the chat function. Please dial in using the details in the invitation. And please do not use the chat function for putting formal questions to the subcommittee. Any persistent or disruptive behaviour will result in your removal from this meeting. Once the application has been considered, any remaining parties in the chamber and online will be asked to leave the hearing. Please do so promptly so that councillors will have the opportunity to deliberate and make a decision. Each party will be notified of the decision within 5 working days. I will now hand over to members to invite them to elect a chair.
Can I nominate Councillor Kennedy, please?
I just dialed the number.
I second that.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Welcome everybody to this Licensing Subcommittee B. You've heard the meeting protocols. I've got a good view, a very good view of everybody in the room. I can see when hands go up here. I'm also online and I will try and log when hands go up online. The first thing we need to do is just introduce ourselves fully as a subcommittee. I'm Councillor Chris Kennedy. I am a councillor in Hackney Wick Ward.
Councillor Smith, Chair of Licensing, and Councillor in Stoke Newington Ward. Nice to see you all.
Good evening all. I'm Councillor Susan Fadano Thomas. I'm the Cabinet Lead for Community Safety and Regulatory Services. Chair, just want to say in the interest of openness, as I've introduced myself, I'm the Cabinet Lead for Community Safety and Regulatory Services. So I'm the Cabinet Member for Licensing.
That's good.
Previously with these premises, I have been involved in various conversations in the last few years, but not directly around this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We will take that as a formal declaration of interest, and I'll go to Councillor Smith for his declarations of interest as well, please.
None, Chair. None.
Thank you. Mr. Dowds.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, I didn't appreciate that your colleague sitting to your left is the Cabinet Member for Policy for Licensing. I'd ask you if you maybe seek legal advice. Ordinarily, it would be unlawful to have a policy maker and a decision maker sitting in the same role. So if you've got a cabinet member that has delegated authority to make decisions on licensing and policy, you can't have the same person ordinarily sitting and making judgments. There's normally a separation of those two roles. So I was wondering whether it could just be clarified how the local authority has overcome that conflict.
Thank you. Our cabinet member with the responsibility for licensing has been a member of our licensing committee for the past 10 years at least, but I will refer to our legal officer just to confirm that for you. yourself as well, please.
Hello, good evening. My name's Amanda North from Legal Services, and I'm supporting members this evening. Just to confirm that Councillor Fidana Thomas has been a member of the Licensing Committee for a number of years, and she doesn't sit regularly, but she does sit on various committees. So it just happens to be that she's sitting this evening. There hasn't been any issue in the past. She isn't making policy decisions on a daily basis. We've only had our licensing policy renewed last year, and we've had our recent cumulative impact assessment being considered. But you know, we haven't had any conflict and any issues previously, so I don't anticipate there should be a problem this evening.
I'm not going to say anything further, but it might be something that the legal services need to look at, because normally, as a matter of law, you can't have a policy decision person also being a decision maker on implementing policy. So, for example, if the cabinet member is responsible for gathering the policy and putting forward to the council or cabinet cumulative impact, for example, they would have a policy and be driving that. You can't then have that same member on a decision-making body making a decision on application relating to that policy. There's a conflict. But I'm not going to raise anything more. It's not, can I make it absolutely clear, Councillor? It's nothing to do with you personally. I'm just saying the two roles normally don't sit together. So I'm not suggesting that you're not going to sit there and hear this fairly, and clearly you are. But I just raise that point. Normally they are two distinct functions and the both should not meet. It's like being in Parliament making the law and then sitting in judgment as a judge. Those two roles between a policy maker, lawmaker, and a decision maker on a tribunal are separate.
We'll note that point, and the next time we have training with council, we'll check with them. Thank you. I skipped over apologies of absence because we went straight to declarations of interest, but we're all three of us here, so we have no apologies for absence. I will get other people when they speak to introduce themselves, because I don't want to take up further time with introducing everyone who is online and in attendance. So please note, when you come to speak, please introduce yourself. We have no minutes of the previous meetings before us tonight. Page 13 lays out the hearing procedure that we're following tonight. It's fairly simple. I will go to the licensing officer to introduce the application before us tonight. I will go to the applicant's representative. We will then hear from the responsible authorities that we've got representations for. That's the police and the licensing service. We will then go to other people. When it comes to representations from other people in particular, there are a lot of you here. There are a lot of you online who've made representations. We will be here for a very long time if everyone takes up the 5 minutes to which you are entitled when you come to speak. So I will ask you, if it is simply a case that you agree with what's been said before, please just say that. Don't repeat the full representation that has already been made, just for the sake of us getting through this hearing sensibly tonight. Thank you very much. With that said, we will go to an outline of the application before us, please. So that's our agenda item 6, our substantive item for tonight. That's the Arches, 83 Rivington Street. Suba, please.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Subhashri Ramana, Principal Licensing Officer, and I'm presenting the report. The licensing service of receipt of an application for a premises license received under the Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003 for the premises The Archers, 83 Rivington Street. The premises seeking permission for regulated entertainment and to authorize the supply of alcohol for consumption on the premises from 11 to 1 a.m. Monday to Thursday, from 11 to 3 a.m. Friday and Saturday, and from 12 to midnight Sunday, and to authorize the supply of alcohol for consumption of the premises from 11 to 2300 Monday to Saturday, and from 12 to 2300 Sunday, and late night refreshment from 2300 to 1 a.m. Monday to Thursday, 2300 to 3 a.m. on Friday and Saturday, and from 2300 to midnight on Sunday, as stated within the report. We have received additional submissions from the applicant, police, and from other persons, especially from C1, C4, C14, C29, C37, C51, C77, and C90. All these documents have been circulated. Representations remains from the police, licensing, and other persons, and I have nothing else to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Just checking, Mr. Dadds, that you've had sight of all those extra documents.
I have had all the documents that have been sent by Democratic Services.
Splendid. Thank you very much.
Chair, could I, through you, could I just check that you received the summary of submissions and also the little plan that we include?
Thank you. Yes, we did. Yeah, we recognise that. For clarification, any questions, colleagues, at this stage?
None, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dadds, we'll come to you to outline the application and in particular, please, the nature of the operation that will go forward at this premises under the proposed licence. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So good evening, members. It's actually quite nice to return back to the council in person. I think this is my first time for COVID, so it's quite nice to come back. I have already set out a summary of submission, so I will refer to that later on in the debate or discussion if we need to. But perhaps members just could confirm that they've read the summary submissions.
Colleagues?
Yep, confirmed, Chair.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
So,
you.
so I'm not going to read it out verbatim, but we'll refer to it later. One thing that I would emphasise, if I may, we did enclose a map, and that is a diameter of 200 or a radius of 100 metres. And I would like, through you, Chair, if anyone is speaking, to identify whether they're in that space or outside of that space. So then I know how I will address maybe comments made by individuals that are present. So in relation to the nature of the application, my client having the responsibility for the lease and wanting to, in effect, put it into operation beyond the current licence, we've applied for 2:30 to 3 a.m. You'll know that they already have for EPA, traffic and Shoreditch, that this premises will in effect have the same trading style of those three premises. It will be a late night bar.
Sorry, can you just say those names again, please?
Yes, it's paragraph 15 of my speaking note. For EPA, traffic and Shoreditch. And so the Arches will be a late night bar, akin and similar to those bars already operating in the area, and they literally be the same trading style and operation. So a late night bar, and in addition, the designated premises supervisor is a long established general manager of the area, and currently is the designated premise supervisor for traffic. So that person will come on board and make sure that the premises is run in accordance with the practice and procedures of the other premises, and to ensure that the licensing objectives are promoted. In essence, it's a late night bar. You will see with paragraph 15, the proposed hours Friday and Saturday, for example, 2:30, 3 o'clock close. The other premises that we have nearby are 3:30 close, 4:30 close and 4 o'clock. So it's a spread, but this will be the earliest. And they do have Licensing Connect, and they will be seeking accreditation with Hackney Nights, as we do already at the other establishments. The premises and the premises management and owners have recently been granted new licenses in the area. We're very familiar with the area, and so the premises is in effect being a late night bar. I would say this, that the premises at the moment with the lease, it is relevant in relation to our application. The rent and the rates are about 400,000 a year. I understand that the rates are about 100,000 to the London Borough of Hackney, and that the rent, 40% of the rent goes to Hackney because of part of the land must be a municipal land. So about 40% of the rent goes to Hackney, which is another 100,000. So I think Hackney receives about 200,000 a year. As we know, that there has been a wide change in the area in relation to premises and footfall. And so it is imperative that we are in effect obtaining a later license so that we can be viable at the very least, so that we can take on employment and pay our way, as it were. The idea is that there will be 20 staff approximately employed, and the normal procedures and operating manual has been provided, and I have Mark here with me if there's any particular questions. But that's as a summary, that residents understand it's going to be a late night bar akin to the premises we already have. And I will say this, that the Shoreditch, which is only, I think, approximately 8 buildings away on Shoreditch High Street Road, was granted recently without objection and without a hearing to 4 AM by us. So it'll be separate akin to that. I know there's a lot of emotion here and there's history past, but I ask that this application be judged on its own merits.
Thank you, and thank you to keeping to under 5 minutes. For clarity, can I, because you are applying for films, for live music, for performance of dance and anything of a similar description. What you've just described doesn't include all of those. Are there any of them that you wish to say you don't need to have that on the application anymore?
Well, we do, in relation to films, it can be in effect a broadcast, or it could be that for EPA sometimes we do have groups that may come and watch film or during the week. So that's why we've asked for that. In relation to dance, as you know, the facilities for dancing is required if you want a dance area floor, but that was taken away, deregularized, and customer dancing is not regulated in that way. So I think it's just making sure that if you have screens or monitors, you've got film. There is no magic. It's just what we've got on the other premises, which we applied for recently regarding, making sure that if you display a film or you're broadcasting on a TV, that you meet the requirements of the Act. Anything particular I can answer?
So it was live music, particularly?
Yes, we have said that we may have in a band from time to time. So obviously we would need to apply for that. In the arches, up to 2,300 hours, it's deregulated, we don't require it. But for example, if we had a band, even a 3 or 4 piece, with a drummer, a guitarist, a saxophonist, we would require that. I would say this, in relation to live music, this is probably the best place if you were going to have it, because the arches are self-contained and directly opposite is the municipal buildings. Environmental health and noise pollution team have seen the application, and they would be duty bound to object if they wish to, but they raised no objection on grounds of noise.
Thank you. And I wasn't clear on performances of dance either.
I think actually that is, I'll take instructions whether we need that. That's really in case we employ someone to dance. That's probably unlikely, but I'll get that clarified.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues?
Yeah, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Condition 25, page 25, talks about sound limiter, Mr. Dadds. obviously you can't put a drum kit through a sound limiter. So we kind of recommend electronic drum machine, essentially for that, because you can't put it through a limiter. So that means that condition becomes void, really, if the drum kit's involved. It's a small point, but I'm just saying it can't be used for a sound limiter. Drum kit cannot be used.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think you are a musician yourself, and you will know that acoustically and drums can't be put through a noise limiter. However, as I indicated earlier, it was only occasionally we will be probably doing live music, but in any event, in the arches, it won't be affecting any resident in the local area. So it is ideal for that type. And I do note that it is important actually that you do from time to time do have the space where the people creative can come and do that. And I did read in the recent report that certainly culturally some spaces are lacking, and there's only a few spaces, and it's on the decline. So this will be a nice space should people want an opportunity maybe to show what they can do and hear new music and help grassroots musicians during the weeks when we're not particularly busy, and the hours during the week are quite limited. Thank you.
On the recorded music side, what do you plan to do after 11 in terms of the recorded music?
Just your normal type of chart music, so just literally recorded music. We will have someone controlling and playing that music, but in effect, it's just recorded music.
Thanks, Chair. Thank Mr. Dad. Just two quick clarification in terms of from your application, the off sale. Obviously, the off sale here is Monday through Sunday. Just would like if you can clarify, with people would just be walking in from the street to the premises to get alcohol. Would be good to clarify that. And the second clarification is on your submission, paragraph 212 of your submission. There is a mention of the applicant will seek to work with immediate neighbors, and just want to find out before tonight, was there any sort of engagement or connection with the immediate neighbors in the area? Thank you.
Thank you very much. In relation to the off-sale, we're happy to withdraw that. I mean, we put it on the application because we thought that occasionally someone may want to go off because we've got a restaurant area, but we're quite happy to withdraw that. In relation to engagement, we will commence the engagement and continue to have engagement with our neighbours. We do speak to our neighbours. We don't have any immediately to us that reside immediately to us as a building, but clearly I have had a number of the residents' representations. I went through the exercise of trying to establish if there were any nearby so we could engage with them, but the local authority told me that there was only possibly one, and that one person could possibly even be outside of that circle. So therefore, immediately within 100 meters of the premises, I don't believe there is a representation from anyone living in that circle. So therefore, I wouldn't have engaged with that person. Sorry, I would have engaged with that person. Those outside I generally won't until we know a bit more detail. I did look at the other addresses, and in fact, when I looked at it as a whole, I only put 3 nearby. There were potentially 15 residents in a much wider area, and then most of them were a boundary cover road, is it Wargrave, Clifton, Virginia, Columbia, Montclair. All of these are all across the the way across the A10 and to the boundary of the, I think, Tower Hamlets.
Thank you. And a note to other people to please say clearly how close to the application site you live when you make your representations. I will be, sorry, please share the circle again. Was this, did everyone get this email to them? Sorry.
Louise, are you? Yes.
And your contention is that that circle is 100 meters radius?
Yes,
from the
it's,
application?
yeah, the diameter is 200, but it's 100 meters radius.
Radius, yeah, okay.
And the, I asked the local authority if they would do that map, and they produced the map very kindly, so I thank Democratic Services for that and licensing. And then I asked the question, how many people are within that radius? But I think it is important, when you've got 120, I want to try to understand a bit more detail. As the councillor was saying, you know, how do we engage? How do we, because we normally would write, and we normally pass it through licensing or try to write directly.
No, that it is a fair point, and we do regularly ask people how close they live to venues when they come and speak at subcommittees. Thank you. Anything else for clarification at this stage? No?
No, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We come to the responsible authorities. We will take those in the order in our papers. So the first responsible authority was the police submission. That is B1 in our papers at page 51. That's at PC. Griggs, do you want to introduce your rep, or shall we go straight to your barrister? Mr. Soleimani, isn't it?
Yes. Mr. Soleimani, counsel for the Metropolitan Police. Thank you, Chair, Committee. The police firmly object to this application. It's going to be a blight on the local area. It's going to cause serious crime and disorder and a real nuisance for locals that they've enjoyed a couple of years without and deserve to continue enjoying. Before I continue, I just want to emphasize that this issue about the 100-meter radius, whilst it matters where people live, the reality is the kind of issues that these places create is not localized to people who live 100 meters away. We have crowds coming in. They don't immediately disperse as soon as they leave the 100-meter radius. They go around Shoreditch. They cause issues to neighbors all over the area. So it's not just about that 100 meters. It's a very unrealistic way to look at dispersal issues. To begin with, Chair, this is in essence a proposal for what will be a high-capacity nightclub, a capacity of potentially around 500 persons. Oh, okay.
Maybe slightly further away.
Sure. No, don't worry. This is my normal speaking voice, but I can hear it's quite loud as well. But if that works, okay. Yes. It's going to be a large capacity nightclub in an area that already has intense cumulative impacts. And what intense cumulative impacts means, it's an area that's been identified by your policies having already a large amount of crime, a lot of disorder, that's already at a boiling point. And adding another nightclub into the mix is going to make things substantially worse. You will have seen from the crime data that BC Griggs has provided that when this premises was in operation, there were extraordinary rates of crime, and there has been a correspondingly extraordinary drop in crime since it has closed down. In the second, there has been an 85% drop between the crime rate occurring in the second 6 months of 2021, so just those 6 months compared with the whole of 2024. That is the difference we say is primarily been occasioned by this nightclub, this premises closing down. That kind of crime, that kind of disorder creates huge problems, not just for the police, but most importantly for the local community who have to suffer with that. And they suffered with that when that venue was in operation. Now, the key problem, as you'll know from the previous decisions of this committee, the key problem with the previous premises was the operator, as well as the enormous capacity of the premises and the fact it drew crowds. The reason their license was revoked twice, or one of the key reasons their license was revoked twice, was because they had an operator who was reckless, who had no regard for the licensing regime, who didn't have the right number of door staff, who didn't take people's safety seriously. This same person is the director of the company who is applying for this license today. This operator is going to, for those reasons, he's going to run the operation exactly as he did previously. It is extraordinary for someone who has that bad a track record, who has caused that much of a headache for the local community and local emergency services, and whose actions and whose failure to control his premises resulted in life-changing injuries for people and serious assaults in premises he operated. It is extraordinary such a person would come back before this committee and say, give me another license. Not just a second chance, but a second chance. The police cannot fathom why this application is being made by this person again. He is not the right kind of person to operate a high-capacity nightclub in Hackney. And, you know, there's some debate over what kind of premises this is because the application is very imprecise and vague, and the applicant says it's going to be a late-night bar. We disagree. We think it's clearly going to be a nightclub. It's a high-capacity venue of around 500 persons. If you look at the map of the site, which is the same map the premises has had in its previous iterations, there's a few tables and chairs, but most of the space is a dance floor. Most of the space is empty of tables and chairs, or would be removable tables and chairs. That tells us this is a nightclub, and it's going to be open into the late hours of the early hours of the morning, serving alcohol throughout that time. Now, the problem is nightclubs are, of course, high-risk premises. They're arguably the most high-risk kind of licensed premises because they attract enormous crime. They attract large crowds of drunk people who are vulnerable, who are potentially going to get involved in crime or be victims of crime. When you're dealing with a nightclub, what you need is a responsible operator you can trust to maintain the highest standards and a firm suite of conditions to control their behavior. Firstly, the operator is someone you can trust. Secondly, when you look at this application, for some reason it's been presented with a very narrow list of conditions that are far fewer and far more limited than we expect for a nightclub. So you don't have an operator you can trust, and you don't even have conditions that could regulate a nightclub properly. That poses serious risks of nuisance, crime, and disorder. The reality is, and there is for some reason this debate about whether these people, the local people who are making representations, live nearby enough. We do not believe that over 100 local people have been wasting their own time writing in applications and turning up today, and you'll hear from them, even though they don't live in the area, even though they're unaffected. The reality is these people are clearly unaffected. You've read the representations, and so have I. The dominant theme in them is fear and genuine despair at the thought of this premises coming back into operation. These people are clearly having an extremely hard time when this operator was running his two previous nightclubs here. They have had a reprieve. They are very grateful for that. There's a nice new venue in this premises being run seriously, professionally, and generating a good income. The idea that this story, which has had a happy ending after the committee has twice revoked the license and twice done the right thing, the idea that we should turn back the clock, get rid of this happy ending, and bring back this disordered nightclub run by this reckless operator is unconscionable. The police cannot, we firmly object to that proposal. And that ultimately is the police's submissions on that matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you to be really clear? Are you asking us to completely refuse this application, or are you saying that with a withdrawal of some of the hours or some of the applied for regulated entertainment, you think we could, you would not object? Is there any hours or type of activity that you would not object to by this operator at this site?
Yes, not at all, Chair. There's no permutation of conditions that we would be happy with, and there's really two reasons for that. The first is the operator is not someone we have faith in, because he's had these opportunities to run his premises. He has shown not just disregard for the licensing regime, but an extraordinary recklessness to running his premises, and we just have absolutely no faith in an operator like that. We can't accept that. But beyond that, it is just, we have given this person opportunities, and the reality is running a nightclub in this area caused such serious problems before. You've seen the extraordinary drop in the crime rates, for example, 85% between the second 6 months of 2021 and 2024. That is an extraordinary change. And so we oppose this operator running the premises, and we oppose a 500 capacity nightclub here run by that operator. So no conditions would satisfy us.
Thank you. That's very clear. Councillor Fitzgerald-Thomas. This is just for clarification
Yeah,
at this point.
it's just for clarification. Thanks, Mr. Suleimani. Can I just confirm you are aware that the premises has a license, has a current license, and in the police submission, there is a comment that the premises have been running without concern under Mr. Noel Morford. Are you saying that is what you want to see within the premises moving forward? Is that?
Well, it's not for us to say what kind of premises is right for the area, but what we can say is, generally speaking, a premises like the one that's currently operating, with clearly responsible operator with good hours, that's not causing a problem in the community, that's clearly a good neighbor in the community, that takes its role in the community seriously. That kind of premises, absolutely, we'd want to see. This premises we've been dealing with, that's currently in place, we've had absolutely no issues with them. They've responded well to us, worked well with us, and worked well with the community. That is what we want to see, is precisely the opposite of what we think will happen if this application is granted, and that's why we firmly oppose it.
Yeah, just on this, the current license, there are one condition on there that's pretty important. I just wanted to clarify whether you would accept a condition like this on this new license, which is no DJ-led events are permitted at any time. That's on the current license. And also there's another condition on there, no performances of live music shall be permitted in any of the external areas. So those two conditions are quite tight, because you did say that you wouldn't accept any conditions, but I'm proposing that those conditions would be tight enough to reassure you that it wouldn't be a nightclub.
Yes. I think as a matter of logic, Councillor, like every step we take to whittle this down further and further from being a nightclub means it poses less risk to community. So if you took away, for example, the provision of alcohol, it would be a safer thing. But the problem is, firstly, we have no faith in this operator. He is a reckless person. You can put all the conditions you want. You can have hundreds of conditions, but if you don't trust the person to follow their conditions, then they aren't worth the paper they're written on. This is someone who repeatedly didn't follow their conditions. The other problem is it would still be a very high capacity venue, still serving alcohol late into the night. You still have so many of the same risks. And I do want to be entirely clear, we're not saying that only nightclubs pose a risk. I mean, the reality is any 500-person venue that serves alcohol late into the night is going to pose a risk of crime and disorder, is going to pose a real risk of nuisance to the local community. It's going to inject a lot of potential disorder into an area with high cumulative impacts already. So that in itself is a risk. So we wouldn't be happy with that amendment either.
Thank you. Anything else, colleagues?
No, Jay.
No. So we go to our next responsible authority, which is our own licensing authority. The rep is B2 at page 80 in our papers. Mr. Riviere, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You can see my representation, Appendix B2 on page 66. It relates mainly to the cumulative impact, core hours, but again, our history with not only this premises, but as the police have pointed out, the operator of this premises. It would seem quite illogical for us to say that a license should maybe be granted for someone who has had their license revoked twice before. One of those times was following a protracted kind of process whereby we agreed to modify the conditions and reduce the hours and settle one of the issues via consent order. And following that, the applicant still went on to lose that license that was still revoked. Even the modified and reduced hours license was still revoked from the applicant. So it's very difficult for us to have any confidence in the applicant from that regard. Then the impact on the local area and the licensing objectives in particular in relation to the crime figures that have been mentioned and the impact on local residents, that's something that
it's very hard for us to kind of feasibly see how a return to that nightclub style operation can be done in a way that will actually promote the licensing objectives, particularly with this operator as well. And that's really the crux of it, Chair. I mean, you could see the previous comments from previous decisions of subcommittees in my representation, as well as the documents that's been appended. But other than that, Chair, there's nothing really further to add unless you'd like clarification on particular points.
No, thank you. That's very clear. Councillor Fitzgerald-Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. It is a very short one, and this is to the applicant. We've heard both from the two responsible authorities, the local authority and the police, around the operators of these premises, the lack of confidence. Can I ask, can you clarify the involvement, or if we're mindful to grant this, approve this application tonight, what would be the involvement of this operator? We've had both responsible authority mentioned to us tonight.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. I think it would be good to do it now.
And given that we've heard both the responsible authorities talk about the operator, I think we need to be clear who's going to be in control at a senior management level and who's going to be responsible for day-to-day operations.
Yes. Well, firstly, Chair, I'm grateful for the question actually from your colleague, because I'm sitting here really tempted to sort of jump up and say, hang on a moment, because in the police's representation, there's no words like reckless, trust. You're allowed to amplify what you've written, but you're not allowed to come here and ambush us today with those words. You will not find any of those words, the motive words, in the representation. There's words about what happened previously, but banding around words, 2-3 years on, and saying words like reckless person, reckless operator, trust. There are a number of key words there. I'm recording the meeting, you're recording it. And I must say, I asked the police to maybe keep to their representation, and also to be fair for us. Because I see some of you members are nodding, and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, I need to speak. First things first, at a director level, Mr. Khan is known and sometimes referred to as Rocky, is a director here and will be a director. So we're not shying away from that. It is true, if you've had a license before and you've had it removed, it doesn't mean you can't come back and have another license. I can tell you that there are premises across London, like the Brixton Academy. There are many, I can name so many, that have had incidents arise at the premises, including death, and reopen under the same companies. This is a company, not an individual company, and it has a management team. They look, review, passage of time, and they move forward. The really important thing that I want members to take into account, that the police did not object to this, what they call a reckless operator, for a license to 4 o'clock, 4:30 at Faripa. They didn't object, they didn't object to the Shoreditch that was granted 3:30 to 4 o'clock. I correct, Shoreditch. That was negotiated out, and the license granted without hearing. That's only 8 doors away. They didn't object then. They didn't say that this person should not have a license till 4 o'clock in the morning.
Sorry, Mr. Dadds, we're addressing just here the question of who's managing the premises and who's managing the overall company. I'll let you know. I understand why you want to make that argument, but that's for the discussion phase. This is a clarification now.
So
Thank you.
In relation to the management, as I indicated earlier, the DPS of traffic, who has a lot of experience, he will be managing day-to-day the premises. Lots of experience of the area, lots of experience of managing. In fact, it's probably more dense, more populated up near where traffic is, rather than to the arches. So he will be there day to day. You can be assured of the operation and the management there. We are, and we do in our other venues around, and it will be the same here. So same here. We will be, we will go for accreditation with Hackney Nights as we are with the other premises. We will work with our neighbours. We have a really good working relationship with the police. Had you been outside, when it started, we're all chatting nice and friendly. So I don't know what's happened when you come into the room. It's like I'm dealing with two different worlds. But the reality is that this operator deals professionally with the police. And the last hearing, they confirmed that the premises,
You're straying again.
But I will say this, in the last hearing, I think Councillor Gilbert Smith was there, and they said they do work with them, they are professionals, so someone that they can work with and promote the licensing objectives, and then they granted a license to 4:30. You can't have it both ways.
Chair, I do need to raise a correction, which PC Griggs will, because you were told that there was no
Thank you.
objection
Yep.
or concerns from police, and that needs to be addressed. If PC Griggs can speak to that.
Yeah, just to confirm that police did submit representations to all three traffic, Shoreditch and Floripa applications when they were submitted. We will say that we discussed in the interim period before the hearing regarding traffic in the Shoreditch and agreed reduced hours with the applicant, but Floripa, we went to the subcommittee that was held a couple of weeks ago. So we did put in representations to all three of them initially.
Thank you. Any other points for clarification to Mr. Riviere?
Not from me, Chair.
Not from me.
Thank you. So we now move on to the representations from other persons, which are listed from page 102 onwards in our papers. I'll be taking people in the room first. Louise, would you like to say something? Yes. Sorry, please, can you turn your mic on?
My apologies. If I could ask for a point of clarification, probably from Amanda in the legal team, around the DJ-led events condition. I believe as this is a new licence and we're looking at a capacity of 500 or less, that condition would actually be unenforceable. The one saying that there will be no DJ-led events actually just doesn't apply at this recommended capacity.
Sorry, yes, you're referring to the condition in the other license
that Mr. Dodds
Councillor
has
Smith was
proposed,
talking
yeah.
about. I'm going to let you make that point when you speak to us, because that's for the discussion phase.
I thought that Amanda might be able to clarify that
I will
now.
come back to Amanda and ask her to.
Sure, okay.
Thank you. I've had some very great work from the officers, and they're fairly confident that we know who's in the room who made a rep and who's online who made a rep, who I should come to. And so I will just read out the list I've got and stick your hand up in the room or online if you think you've made a rep and therefore I should be calling you. If you are not in the room, Louise Garrett, Rupert Pugsley, Jonathan Moberly, Suzanne Cow, Nicholas Lawrence, Fabian Taurelio, or Jean Hocker, or online, Andrew Cantor, Luis Vincente, telephone user Chris, possibly Chris Mason. Is that you, Chris, online? Nod if that's you. Yes, it is. Great, thank you. Jean-Sébastien de Boisseau and Sam Butler. Online. Yes, Andrew, no, I'm coming to you. I see you. Yep, but I'm not coming to you now. Unless, yeah, okay, he's fine with that. Sorry, do you think I haven't read your name and you want to speak? Yes, I read out his name. Thank you. Great. So those names I read out will be who we'll be hearing from. Now, that's well over an hour if everyone takes up their 5 minutes, so please don't. Can you check and we'll come back? So just speak with the officer, please. Thank you very much. And try and do that quietly. And Louise, I'll come to you for your first 5 minutes. Off you go.
Good evening, everyone. I represent the Shoreditch Community Association. I live pretty close to this nightclub. I've been in the area for 17 years. I in fact saw the applicant in Franco's coffee shop this afternoon. Everybody ignored me, so this idea of neighbourhood outreach doesn't exist. This has been a venue that has been incredibly problematic over my entire duration of living in Shoreditch. We're very, very aware of when it is open and when it is opening late into the night. We are very concerned that this should reopen. The current operator under MKN Resources has been very responsible and has been very engaged with the community, and has been, quite frankly, a breath of fresh air compared to the previous operator. I'm aware that there have been 2 license revocations in the past, one of which resulted in somebody receiving a life-changing injury. We shouldn't be encouraging operators to operate in such a way that somebody does end up with a life-changing injury. That is not what Shoreditch is about. Shoreditch is meant to be a fun place where people can have a good time and go home safely. To the police's data that states very clearly that we have very, very high crime in the area when this venue operates. We as residents know that. And because it is such a large venue, it does pull in people from all over London when it's operating. And quite a lot of those people who come into the area don't use public transport because this is a 3 a.m. finish. So they do actually park in residential streets considerably further away than the 100 metres of dispersal ring that's been put around this. My road at Charlotte Road has quite a lot of residential parking down it, which unfortunately ends at midnight, which means that I suffer from the outpouring of this venue quite badly. Particularly the parties which then continue around the parked cars afterwards. I know the same goes for Hoxton Square, and I also know that it goes particularly badly into the Boundary Estate. And I'm afraid I do not buy the fact that the Boundary Estate is the other side of Tower Hamlets, that we don't have responsibility for those residents there. It is a very family, child-centric estate. And I know that other members of the delegation here this evening will talk very strongly about the impact that had on that, on those children in that estate. This is not a responsible operator. I will go with the police on this one. They have clearly had a lot of meetings with the operator over the previous 15 years. And in many of the other hearings, it's been very clear that they have been told stories which have never, in fact, come to be true. I don't want to call them lies, but they're pretty much there. They're often told that things will be fine, things will be normal, we will have lots and lots of staff on board. And then when it actually comes to operating, those staff vanish and we end up with the chaos that then ensues. I don't want to go back to having territorial support vans parked on Shoreditch High Street to control the outpouring from this nightclub. And it is this nightclub, because without it, Shoreditch has been far more manageable and been far, far easier to live in. And that's the end of my submission.
Thank you, admirably within time. I'm only going to take questions of clarification from speakers if you grab my arm, colleagues. I'm going to assume that we can just move on to the next resident in the room.
Could I ask your forbearance if the last speaker, Louise, could just indicate whether she lives within the pink circle or not, please?
Yes, I thought you said the name of the road you lived on. It's not in the pink circle, is it? No, no. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. We appreciate the
I think
point.
it should be noted within the 100-metre radius, there is 0 parking.
Yeah. You follow the point about why they're, so you both know the arguments that both of you will be making about that. Yeah, thank you. Rupert.
No, oh, there we go. Here we go. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Rupert. I have been a resident in Shoreditch since 2012, so 13 years. 16.
Sorry, you want to know the number of the reps when people speak? Yes. Do you know which number rep you were, Rupert? Rupert Pugsley. C79. Thank you, Rupert. Off you go.
So I live at 16 French Place, which is definitely in the pink circle. And what I can say is that there has, as everyone else has said in the room, that there's been a marked difference in safety and enjoyment of the area since the original license or the previous license was revoked. My experience for while cargo was open got me and my partner so close to despair that we were nearly close to leaving Shoreditch. Since then, we are now re-loving living in Shoreditch and fully appreciating what it has. The things that we experienced while cargo was opened was, as people talked about, illegal parking. So people would come and park in front of our house, double stacked, play music loud, and congregate, drinking alcohol, doing narcotics, sometimes, being very disorderly in terms of like, shouting and yahooing, and then they would disappear for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours while they're going to cargo, and then they would come back anywhere from 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning once the venue had shut, and then a lot of times then hang out again, playing music, drinking alcohol, doing narcotics, being disorderly, which would always require us, me and my wife, who couldn't be here tonight because she's working, to go out and as safely and as considerately ask these people to move on. Now, sometimes they did, but a lot of the times they didn't because they were completely intoxicated, couldn't understand what we're asking to do, would refuse to do what they wanted to do because their usual line was, "This is Shoreditch, I can do whatever I want. It's late at night. This is why I come here." And, so it would disturb our sleep. So every weekend, Friday, Saturday nights, we'd have to go out at least once, if not twice over the weekend. And then again on Sunday, bank holiday weekends, when people would come in and party because Monday was a bank holiday day off work. There was also a lot of urinating when we'd come out the next morning on a Saturday, Sunday or Monday morning. There would be litter everywhere. There'd be a huge amount of the nitrous oxide bottles, canisters scattered all around the front of our house and along the street, as well as smashed alcohol bottles, cans of beer and so forth. My wife, who is quite a small woman, she's 5'2", this is quite a confronting experience to walk out to a group of mainly drunk and people under drugs, men who are like yahooing, but she'd have to do it because otherwise if she didn't, then we would be up all night having to listen to their music and them talk. You might be wondering, like, how did I know they were in cargo? It was obvious that's where they would go. I could easily follow them and see them heading in that direction. I got to the point where I was actually asking them before, when they rocked up in their cars and they were hanging out, like, "Oh, where are you planning to go?" They would say, "We're going to cargo. We're here to see this DJ." And then the main evidence is that it was cargo was that as soon as the bar shut, 90% of this stuff went away. So we still get disturbed occasionally, but it's nowhere near what it used to be. As Louise said, I think it's a way more safer, more enjoyable area. I fully appreciate that I live in a nighttime neighbourhood, and I encourage, I want people to come and have a good time. I want to be able to go out and have a good time. But as Louise said, like coming out of my house or coming back from dinner or something and seeing armed police in massive ride vans escorting and trying to manage people going around Shoreditch from this venue is just completely unacceptable and not what the neighbourhood is all about.
Thank you very much, Rupert. Next, we have Jonathan Moberly, the C77 and C78. Thank you, Jonathan.
I'm Jonathan Moberly, Vice Chair of the Boundary Tenants and Residents Association and Chair of Weavers Ward's Safer Neighbourhood panel. The BTRA represents about 800 homes on the Boundary Estate and surrounding streets. Half of our homes are council tenancies, family homes whose occupants have little choice to move away from the Shoreditch nighttime economy area. I'm losing count of how many times we've had to come before this committee on the same matter. The council chamber, impressive as it is becoming a little too familiar. I expect you've all read by now our residents' impact statements that were first submitted in 2021, describing the intensity of weekend nighttime economy disruptions prior to cargo shutting down. Last October, we found ourselves here again, objecting to a new licence application on the same premises by a new operator who went to great lengths to separate himself from Shoreditch Bar Group. A condition was discussed in detail at that meeting that read, this premises licence will only be operated by MKM Resources and at no point sold or given to SBG or any of their known associates. That was strengthened at the hearing by adding that SBG and its known associates are not to be involved in the day-to-day operations of the premises. It was on this basis, with the applicant claiming to be in it for the long term, for at least 5 years, that a new licence was approved. Now, the licence as granted removed this condition. I asked the licensing officers why this had happened, and they said that who's involved in the day-to-day running is not something that can be policed in practice. Now we're amazed that less than 6 months later, we are here again with a new application by the very applicant that was supposed to have nothing to do with the place. At a recent licensing committee hearing for traffic, that's been referred to already today, another SPG venue, the applicant's barrister, Mr. Dadds, argued, and I quote, as no residents have raised an objection, that should convince you that what we are proposing is reasonable and that we can promote the licensing objectives. The residents, with their lived experience, would have objected if they thought that there would have been an undermining. It is they who have the experience of the area. Well, today, a great many residents have objected. On the admission of the applicant's own barrister, this should suffice as evidence that the licensing objectives cannot be upheld. They can't have it both ways. In the applicant's summary submissions, it suggested that our residents' voices should be disregarded as they live in the wrong borough. This is deeply disrespectful. Cleve House, one of our worst affected blocks, does indeed lie in Hackney and within the red circle on the applicant's map. There are 28 family homes in that block alone, and some of those residents have indeed objected. Hackney's border is just at the end of that block. It's a matter of record that the disturbance directly due to this club reaches right across the Boundary Estate, the entire length of Calvert Avenue, Boundary Street, Navarre Street, Camlet Street, Club Row and Arnold Circus were all particularly badly affected. Discrimination against Tower Hamlets residents has to stop. And I note that as people come in on the Teams meet, they're labelled as whether or not they are Hackney residents or residents from outside the borough. Now, we provided pages of evidence of the harm caused when Cargo nightclub was running. That was due to the operation of this particular venue. That was due to the operation of this particular venue is evidenced by the immediate improvement to residents' lives when the club ceased to operate, and by a large volume of incidents that took place on Monday, the 6th of September 2021, when no other venue was operating on that day. Issues continue, as has been mentioned, well after venue closing time, with clubbers abusing the Boundary Estate as a free car park and continuing the party until dawn in a phenomenon that we call car bars. There is no world in which this behaviour suffered by our residents can be considered to be reasonable. No conditions attached to this licence can alleviate such disruption on our streets and in our courtyards, and which can continue hours after the venue has closed. Please refuse this licence.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you for staying within time. Suzanne, please. Suzanne Cow, C104.
Yeah, so I'm the chair of the Boundary Tenants and Residents Association.
Oh, I'm sorry, could I just interrupt you for 1 minute? I have just been reminded, online attendees, please don't use the chat function. It pops up as a tiny bubble on our screen, disappears, and will not form part of the record of this meeting. So your questions and your comments there are pointless. Sorry, just a reminder to everyone, we're being streamed and the people on the stream can't see your comments either, but we are being recorded. So everything that is said will be there and will be on the permanent record, but not anything you put in chat. Thank you.
So I live in the Boundary Estate and agree with everything that Jonathan said. And actually, I feel that it's quite disrespectful that sorry, Mr. Datz, that you are asking all of us to identify where we live, as if like we do not want to consider our objections and we are the residents. So it shows you that the impact of cargo is so widespread that we may live outside your red circle, but your red circle is not meaningful at all. And if I may say that if you think we're just doing this for fun, we've been here so many times, as what Jonathan said, we have so many residents with families tonight, some fasting, dialing in, what is it? It's not for fun. It's really because we are so badly impacted when cargo was opened, right? And personally, as my experience, when cargo was open, there was so many car bars on our estate, starting from as early as 5 p.m. And there was once I went down and said, can you please move away? Because my neighbors' children were crying and they were afraid because the drinking, the noise and everything. When I asked them to go away, I was threatened. And I tried to film them, I was threatened. And I decided to then step back and follow them. And I followed them all the way to cargo. So I'm a personal witness. And the many months since the years since cargo was closed, we had so much more peace on our estate. We're no longer fearful. As a single woman walking past, I'm not as fearful anymore. In the past, we can't walk anywhere after night falls. So we can't walk through Rivington Street to get back to our homes. So I think the amount of crime and the distraught and the grief that cargo has led to us residents not being able to feel safe in our own home. I think I recommend that this application is not approved. And I think this is making a mockery of the council and all our time as well for this to keep coming back. And therefore, if we are trying to kind of abuse the system by coming back to us again and again with the same application, I think it's a waste of all our time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Nicholas Lawrence, your submission is C12. Thank you.
Hello there. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. So I am a resident of Shoreditch that lives on the ground floor of Marlow House. I've been there for 7 years now. And I just want to emphasise on the fact that, this circle in which Susanna has just mentioned here, it's almost insulting that, it's been put to us that the ones that are being directly affected are within this circle when they're really not. The closest parking to this nightclub, I would go as far as to say is directly outside of my property. I live outside a private access way, which is essentially a dead end, which in the past has been a safe haven for 4, 5, 6 cars at a time to park before the venue and then come back to after the venue. And, you know, this late license that it had in the past, this was also a perfect, you know, way for people to come out of the venue, and it's just directly over the road and down at the bottom. Arnold Circus and the Boundary Estate during the daytime is an amazing estate which we all love and care about, and it's perfect for bringing communities together, and that's what we do and how we want it to stay. But during the nighttime, it creates, you know, a horror story for people that just want to continue the party. Directly outside my my windows, as I'm sure you all know, we also don't have a choice of where we live because most of us are social housing tenants. It's a Grade 2 listed building with single glazed windows, and directly opposite on the Arnold Circus is, you know, seated benches, and it's very dimly lit. So, you know, for people that are coming out of this venue, it's a perfect place to stay and continue to disrupt residents. And yeah, to name a few things, as the gentleman here mentioned, bottles were being smashed up against the windows. The urinating on one occasion actually came into my property, as I live on the ground floor. So I actually had people urinating into my property. And yeah, in terms of the confrontation, it's very scary, especially when you are on the ground floor. And you know, your living areas, your bedroom and your bed are directly outside of a place where, you know, these kind of things are happening. I also would just like to mention that in terms of how I feel of when this venue's license was revoked, it almost was an immediate stop in the crime and the disorder. So in terms of the impact that this would have being accepted and put forward again, the fear and the scarcity that's, you know, put into us residents is almost as though the same way that it stopped when it was revoked, if it's been put forward again, it's all going to come back again. And yeah, I really don't want that to happen. And I think that there is a huge mistaken identity in the place that Shoreditch is. It's not this, you know, huge party, crazy place. You know, a lot of people think that the name Shoreditch resonates with that, but it's not. It's actually a very family orientated area nowadays. We've got things like Columbia Road and, you know, lovely cafes and restaurants around. There's a lot more families here. So yeah, it just kind of puts a bit of a dark stain on the area. And yeah, given the capacity of the venue and the closeness to the estate in which we all live, I think that it would be a really bad idea to give someone this license back, given the history that they've had and the trust that we don't have in them. So yeah, please don't accept this license. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Fabian Torriello, C19.
I've been living in the area for 4.5 years. I don't have a lot to add apart from what's already been said, but I would just like to say that the difference between before when cargo was open and since cargo closes is 9 day. I live on the 4th floor. I can't imagine what it's like to live on the ground floor of our building. Yeah, that's what I was to say.
Thank you. Thank you for remembering what I said at the beginning. Thanks, Fabian. Jean Hocker, C67, please.
I've lived in Shoreditch I've lived in my estate for 40 years, so I'm a long-term resident. I remember before nightclubs. And all I just want to say is I support what Louise said, that one night when it was so bad, we had to go down the road and beg the police to bring their vehicles down Calvert Avenue to near the Tower Hamlets side because it was getting fearful. I've witnessed some terrible things. There are lots of children along Boundary Street that have really suffered. There are small children that I know have witnessed glass breaking outside, riots and screaming, blood-curdling screaming. So there's been a series of incidents that have kept people awake at night. Nobody slept, everyone was awake in anticipation. The difference now is, and I agree, the difference now is absolutely amazing. I would not like to see this venue reopened. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Alexis, C92.
My name is Alexis. I've been living in Shoreditch for 11 years. I also would like to say that I find it deeply insulting to try to divide us around an arbitrary 100-meter line. I live about 106 meters, if that helps. 107, I'm not exactly sure. But I can tell you my street is full of people who live there, blocks of flats and terrace houses, families with children, and being 100 meters or 107 meters does not make a difference in terms of the impact that we experienced when this club was around. So by the Mr. Khan's own representation, he already stated that there have been venues next door who have had licenses extended and granted in the recent past. So if this objection is made and cumulative impact is a factor, by his own admission, he's saying that the neighborhood is already having to endure later and longer licenses in the existing area. So Rivington Street is quite a specific street. There's only 2 ways in and out on either side. The dispersal necessitates that they walk through our neighborhood. So we're talking about 500 extra drunk people at 3 o'clock in the morning every single weekend. I really want to make a point of how I agree with everything my neighbors have said, and how I want the councillors to really understand that in the group chats that we have formed actually since COVID, group chats that haven't distinguished whether or not we are Hackney or Tower Hamlets residents, but the level of concern over cargo specifically is unprecedented. I've never seen any other discourse where we openly talk about how Mr. Khan's venues are, and this specific venue is so disruptive to our neighborhood. And we really wonder why the councillors who represent us are choosing to even address this issue again and again and again, when it seems so obvious to the neighborhood that the impact that has happened since it closed down is absolutely enormous. You know, we openly discuss why our councillors are making these choices and giving Mr. Khan the ability to reopen the venue in this way. I would also like to point out that you have the councillor representing, sorry, the gentleman representing Mr. Khan. You've said that this is recorded, and this is, of course, recorded as it should be. But if you remember from the very last recording from this same room on Zoom chat that we were in about giving Mr. Moffat the license, Mr. Moffat said to the camera, to Mr. Smith, the councillor's own question, I have nothing to do with Mr. Khan. I'm going to have this venue for myself. I'm going to run it in an orderly manner. I do not want to open until 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm happy with the midnight break. I don't need a DJ. I have a plan, and I'm a respectable businessman. And then here we are again, literally less than a year later, and Mr. Khan is doing exactly what he said he was not going to do. He's not a trustworthy candidate for this venue's ongoing business. He is repeatedly made a mockery of the system and trying to take advantage of it to get through more money for his profitable businesses already. Please, I would strongly urge you, do not release 500 drunk people onto our streets every weekend. Nothing motivates residents to fight against than sleepless nights. Please don't do this. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Alexis. And Theo, who is C90. C90.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't interrupt the speaker, but a number of the residents are more than amplifying the representation. For example, there's open criticism about trust again about Mr. Khan that wasn't written in the representation. And I think we've got to be very careful about some of those comments that, one, are not written in the original representation, But obviously, I need to have the right to reply to your address.
You will, of course, be getting the right to reply later, Mr. Dadds. And we do note for clarity, the law is very clear. We've done our training. The primary evidence upon which we base our decision is the written evidence that is presented to us before the hearing. We use the hearing and the evidence represented to us at the hearing to expand, sometimes to add to that written representation, and then we take everything into account when we make our decision. Thank you. Sorry, Theo, C90.
Thank you very much. Yes, so I'm a Shoreditch resident as well. Yes, I'm a Shoreditch resident as well, and I've known Mark, who's head of security, who's sitting right here, and I never received any communication regarding what the licensee said in the very opening statement, which is communicating with local residents. And just to answer your question, I am 90. I'm within your 100 meters. I'm literally 30 seconds walk from Cargo, and the data speaks for itself. I've spoken to police many times. I submitted a video to the panel about the riot police vans that turned up and supported us. So that video that you have shows police, 15, 20 police officers turning up to control crowds outside Cargo. I've got more than 40 videos of walking around Shoreditch High Street, Rivington Street, with groups of people, cars going at the time when Cargo is open. So for me, the data is proving itself. The reduction of 85% crime from when Cargo is open to now, it's heaven. We all thought, you know what, we just got to stick this out. There's so many people who've left Shoreditch, but the ones who've lived here for more than 10 years, we're not going anywhere. That's all I've got to say.
Yeah, thank you, Theo. Come to people online now, please. So when I call your name, please turn on your camera and unmute yourselves. So Andrew Cantor, who is C4.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you. Can we just turn the room up a bit, please?
Testing, 1, 2, testing, 1, 2.
Again?
Can you hear me? Just checking. Happy?
Again?
Hello? Hello?
No, I've gone down, if anything.
Oh. I can speak louder.
Tech expert. You might have to lean in closer to your microphone, Andrew. We'll proceed.
I will happily do that. I'll hold my phone as well. Is that any better?
And speak up as well.
Okay, can you hear me?
Just.
Okay, good. So good evening. As you've heard, my representation is at C4. My family lives perhaps maybe 101 meters from the venue, literally the edge of the line, but I don't feel I should be required to publicly disclose my family's address. I and my family are a resident of 13 years, and I'm angry that we're going through this again. And what we're being put through again. And to be blunt, I'm not going to mince words. For the record, my family can see and hear the venue from the upper level of our flat. Shame on the little barrister, the small man who doesn't have a clue how we live, for saying in his submissions that residents are lying. He's a non-resident, a paid mouthpiece who doesn't have a clue.
Mr. Cantor, can you...
I'm sorry?
Sorry, Mr. Babb is objecting to your terminology and your turn of phrase.
Okay, so shame on the barrister for saying in his submissions that residents are possibly not being accurate.
Speak. We've worked out how to do the volume, so you are coming through right at top.
Okay, I'll speak quieter. Would you like me to start again, or would you like me to reformulate what I said?
Can you start again and adjust your phraseology, please? Thank you.
Yes, I will. So I live perhaps 101 meters from the venue, literally the edge of the line, but don't really feel I should be required to publicly disclose my family's address. We are residents of 13 years. Obviously, you can detect that we're angry that we're going through this again and what we're being put through. I'm not going to mince my words. However, I will reformulate them. For the record, my family can see and hear the venue from the upper level of our residence. I think it is disgraceful that the representatives of the applicant have suggested that applicants are intentionally not being accurate in their submissions, as he stated in his summary. He is a non-resident, I assume. Please correct me if I'm wrong. He's a paid mouthpiece, I assume. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Who doesn't really have a clue what the terror of the 10 years of cargo was like. So he's threatened the police when they speak the truth. There was an implied threat. In my 13 years, there's been a lot of change in the neighborhood. The single biggest change in over a decade is the closure of cargo, pure and simple. As others have said, when it was open, the impact was massive. The corner of that street was basically unapproachable at night. We have lives, and we all can't dedicate our lives to fighting this man's business every day, like the shortage. We want to live our lives. But what we've heard from, again, this highly paid mouthpiece is only about money. They want money. They want more money. More money. We, those who have lived here for collectively hundreds of years, simply want to keep a balance in our lives. Because Shoreditch is a balance. And the single biggest imbalance in this neighborhood is this specific venue. And that's the most important thing. But finally, I suppose before I go, you hopefully all received my supplemental representations where I predicted how this process would go. I predicted a bare bones application, which we got, tick. I predicted a glossy late submission, tick. And the only box not ticked was, and in my submissions it says it, jobs, jobs, jobs. Well, I declare license hearing bingo. We've been put through the ringer for a game of bingo. So for all the reasons in all of my representations going back years, I urge the committee to refuse this application. There's no formulation that is acceptable, and enough is enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Luis Vincente, please, is C5.
Luis has told me that can the next person go first because he needed to step out for a few minutes.
Okay, we note that. So, Chris Mason, C3. Are you ready? Although you've disappeared off our screen. He was there. Okay. We'll come back to Chris if he reappears on the screen. Jean-Sébastien de Boisseau, C38, please.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks very much for letting us speaking and addressing these different comments and different impact statements. So myself, I'm married with 4 children, 4 young children from 3 to 10, and living in a bit further than 100 meters, but still impacted. So that's a very, very fallacious argument and very stupid rule, because for such big, as mentioned by the impact statement from the police representative, 500 people to get there. So there's a certain percentage of them driving, and we could attest that people parking and getting to the venue were impacting our lives really, really strongly, and not just when parking, but when coming back to their cars and staying, as mentioned by many residents. So please, I think it's very clear, and I think there's, from what I've heard, there might be only 2 people believing that this could still happen in the room. But please, I ask and I beg your committee to decline this such a venue. 500 people to park. Not everyone is driving, but we could see the massive difference. I've been living since 2013 in the area, in the same flats. Luckily not on the ground floor, but still very impacted even in the street, because it's narrow streets and people are very noisy when drunk. and could witness all the crimes that the facts have been mentioned about crimes from the police representatives, we could definitely witness so much more crimes during this period of time, and very more peaceful life now. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jean-Sébastien. I'm going to go to Sam Butler now, please. I don't see a Sam Butler online. It's C105 if Sam Butler does come up. No. And do we have Luis or Chris back? Can't see either of them. We will look out for them in the future as we move into the discussion phase. I'm going to come straight back to you, Mr. Dadds, and I'm going to give you 10 minutes because there's a very strong body of evidence, both from the police and the residents, talking about linking back to the operation, especially of the venue in the past. We've heard testament of people who've actually asked people where they were going and where they were coming from, someone who followed them and saw them going into cargo. So the link to the premises is there. The police have made reference to the crime facts that they've submitted with the link there. And I also want you to address those points about the nature of the behavior, because it seems that at the boundary estate and the parking, it may be a place. We heard an anecdote of people coming, parking up, preloading, going to the club, coming back and partying then in their streets. And quite a strong rejection of the fact that actually a link, bizarrely, some of the people who live more than 100 meters away are getting the result of the venue because you can park there after certain times and there isn't any parking closer. So there's a lot for you to address, and I'm going to give you 10 minutes for that. Thank you.
So thank you, members, to give me an opportunity to respond. Firstly, is that better? Sorry, I want to, rather than with this one. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to respond. I'll try to do it in 10 minutes. Obviously, equity of arms says that you've heard from the residents, I think nearly an hour, but I'll go through and see what I can do in 10 minutes. Firstly, I do not challenge and don't attempt to go behind the comments regarding cargo. That is an application and a premises a license that doesn't exist anymore. And I set out quite clearly that this is an application on its own merits and type of style that it's going to be. It's not a nightclub. Moreover, the law says that if there has been a review previously, and I gave the example of the Brixton Academy, where the people lost their lives, the premises was able to open again, as long as it satisfied you as the committee and the licensing authority there in Lambeth, that the licensing objectives would be promoted. So this is not a rehearing of cargo or what people experienced in the past. So I don't challenge that, Chair, and I can't and I wouldn't. Now, I'm going to make some points why I believe you can grant this license. So in relation to the area, firstly, I never, and certainly it wouldn't be my position that I'm insulting or being rude to anyone. I've just distinguished a parameter of 100 meters as being an area which is quite reasonable in asserting whether someone can see or hear the activities within the premises. So I think that's more than reasonable. Those living away, I hear what you say. They say they are affected by, or have in the past been affected by, motor vehicles or vehicles being parked near where they reside, and the effect of antisocial behaviour when people return to those vehicles. So I hear that and I'm going to address that. So in relation to the other statements, within the council's own evidence and its own evidence during the assessment of cumulative impact, and there isn't a cumulative impact policy at the moment, as you'll be aware, but when it took through the evidence, it said, in effect, the Shoreditch nighttime economy, i.e. the heyday, is gone. And that in essence, since post-COVID, there's been a dramatic change in relation to the number of visitors that come to the area. In fact, in its own evidence, it says there are a lot of visitors that don't use the nighttime economy and not paying customers, but hang around using outdoor spaces. They talk about car bars and things like that. So there's been a recent assessment of having a look at the area. So firstly, there's been a big change. In fact, in its own evidence, it set out, amongst other things, I'll just get to that one moment.
It was part of our papers, the whole recent cumulative impact study. So you may be able to reference.
Yes, certain pages in it. If you bear with me 1 minute, can I just ask the clock to pause for it so I find something that gets your papers?
Yeah. While Mr. Dadds finds the bit of evidence he wants to refer to, can I just there's a telephone number online. Could you put either come off mute and say who you are if you made a representation, or very quickly write your name in chat and the officers will check whether you've made a representation or not. It's a telephone number ending in 72. I also
apologies. I am only dialed in by the telephone number. I'm in Boundary Seat resident, and I made a representation briefly, obviously against the venue.
Sorry, did you make a written representation? And what is your name, please?
Yes, my name is Angelika Noll. And I made a written representation against the venue, predominantly driven around the crime, the car bars, and the night terrors around when nightclubs are open in the area.
Violaine, yes? Violaine Burai? Is that you?
No, I think she said Angelica.
Yeah, it's Angelika Noll.
Sorry, I didn't hear. Angelica.
Angelica.
We'll find you, Angelica.
Good.
And there was a Mohammed Ahmed trying to join earlier, and there is a Mohammed Ahmed on the list. So if he tries to join, we should let him in, please. You're C97, Angelica. Do you want to quickly speak to us now?
Yeah, very happy. I'm a local resident. I lived in the area 18 years. And we're in a block of flats. We are at the 3rd floor. We have a block of 69 residents that single-handedly created a WhatsApp working group against the night life in Shoreditch, in our street, the car bars, the criminality, the drug taking, the noise, the up to 4 or 5 o'clock parties that were happening on the weekends. The real difficulty to approach the high street because the amount of people, drunken people, the desperate need for more policing. We did not have enough capacity, no security guards to actually monitor, to help us approach some of these car bars when you had families in the block basically cannot, how to close windows and close out the noise to sleep and basically allow kids to sleep. People moved out of the block, we know, because of the noise, and no escape. Additionally, we had an enormous amount of drives through the street, people trying to sell drugs to all these different car bars, and we had knife crime, we had car violence, and this has the last 2 years we basically have had a normal life, and we actually have been able to live and walk and sleep through, and people finding their lives again and enjoying the street again. I know we have the normal crime as every other area, and we know what it's like with telephone theft and so on. We are fully aware of that. We live in the city, we live in the center, but people can sleep again, and we can't have people from all over London come here, park on our streets, and basically party the night away, because venues are too expensive and people party before and after the venue. Is just not acceptable. Please decline the application.
Thank you, Angelica. Mr. Dads, are you ready to resume? Thank you.
Thank you. So, in relation to the pack, I think it's, I've got the public report pack. I think the evidence for the cumulative impact, although it's not in force, there's a paragraph 62 that says there is no definite answer from the council's data sources, including observations, why the main Shoreditch hotspot has moved away despite all the falling crime in the area. So it would be a misstatement to think that crime has fallen since 2021 in the borough by the numbers that the police say in the residents, because cargo was closed as one premises. Whilst I don't criticise about the residents about cargo, I think we need to bring it back to some reality that since COVID, there are a complete shift and change in the way that the area is operating. And in fact, within your own evidence of the council, it says at page or paragraph 611, very few venues are left from Shoreditch's nighttime heyday. In essence, they are seeing that the appeal made over 20 years ago regarding culture and the area is in effect disappearing. So there has been a dramatic footfall in the area. And I looked at the TfL touching stats, and for the Shoreditch Railway and the Old Street and Liverpool Street, between them, for the touching points, there's less than 1 million visitors into that triangle, that area, from those transport modes. So there's a huge reduction in footfall in the area. So I think one has to put it into context about why things are changing, how they're changing. However, the point that I would say is that, and I think I want to make it clear, that we have been running within that circle that I drew, 145, the Shoreditch, a bar, which is the same we proposed to operate, and we've been operating that, and that's closer to the boundary estate because it's there, and we've been operating that late, and we've just been granted a license by the authority without objections from the police or licensing authority or public health or any members of the public to, I think it's 4 a.m. And we were operating before that, I think, until 3. So where that I've heard from a number of residents, Suzanne, about peace in the area, Jean says about it's amazing now, Rupert the same. Well, our premises that we operate as a bar on Shoreditch is there and has been there. And so that means they're giving evidence themselves that we can actually run a bar successfully there without causing any concern. And it'll be the same for the Arches. It'll be a licensed premises, a bar. The issue around the area and why I drew the chart, as I say, was about those residents in that area. Could they see it, hear it, or smell it normally as a test? And that is more than sufficient. I've walked around that area. I know the area exceptionally well. I've been doing licensing here about 20 years, if not more. And walking around and the corners, you would not physically hear or see the activity within the arches. Now, dispersal way, Mr. Chairman, in relation to the data that was gathered at page 161, paragraph 681, when there was observations by those who were collecting data for the cumulative impact, they looked at dispersal. They looked at the Lighthouse Bar, which is operated by us, and they looked at the Shoreditch. And both of them, in the evidence, say closed and dispersed quickly. So they evidenced themselves that even those were dispersing correctly. I don't know what's happened with the boundary when the boundary road closed for vehicles to go around it. I don't know when that occurred, but certainly you used to be able to drive up there, turn around and go around, but you can't do that anymore. So you can't in effect drive around as much. You can obviously go down there, and there is on-street parking with different zones and parking control by the local authority. However, we have not had any cause of complaint, as we understand it, from 145, nor would we from our arches. Predominantly people do use public transport, but what I would say, because there's not a cumulative impact policy in place, we have to obviously give instructions and direct people about leaving quietly, acting responsibly, and within my speaking note, I make it quite clear what the statutory guidance says at footnote 6. Beyond the immediate area surrounding premises, these are matters for personal responsibility of individuals under the law. An individual engages in antisocial behaviour is accountable in their own right. However, it will be perfectly reasonable for a licensing authority to impose a condition. For example, it requires the licence holder to place signs at exits from buildings encouraging patrons to leave quietly. So there are a number of steps that can be taken. We put those already within our operating schedule, and environmental health are content that we've done that correctly. So what I'm saying is, outside, we can do what we can and how we can manage it. I think we are managing 145 without complaint, and as I say, we got that extension to 4 o'clock. In relation, pardon? Yes, a new license to 4 o'clock. We operate a number of premises nearby without complaint, and that we will do the same in relation to running this as a late night bar. Now, in relation to the police data, we got that very late. As you know, we got served upon us. But I did have an opportunity. I did ask the police for the full christening CADs, and they say that they couldn't provide it to us. But I've had to look at it as best as I can. But looking through that crime data, the police have told us that what's happened in and around the area, and what I deduce from it, from 2 o'clock to 3:30, so nearly a period of 15 months, I worked out there was about 9 matters arising in that time. So between 2 o'clock and 3:30 in Rivington Street, there were 9 matters. And I asked then the officers, could you tell me if any proceeded or what happened? And in relation to some of those matters already, I can tell you that a number of them didn't proceed. People weren't willing to substantiate it. And in effect, I don't know the full outcome. but crime in Rivington Street is low. It's in effect nine matters arising between 2 and 3:30 in a 14-month period. And so one can't say that in the area there's a high crime occurring. You could have said that on previous data prior to COVID, but we're not looking at COVID. We're looking at matters as they are today. And as I say in my speaking note, we look at each application, we look at the evidence which is before us today, and in the area, crime is low. So, and we know that we are an operator that operates nearby. We know we've had licenses, new licenses granted without objection. We know we have operating procedures in place at work. We know that we've got, in relation to the Shoreditch, that's closer to these residents that have spoken this evening, and that they say they're not disturbing how we operate that. So, I mean, with no disrespect, this premises is a premises that can be licensed. The operator has been licensed recently and demonstrated that they can promote the licensing objectives. I have, as I say, I have gone through the speaking note in some detail, and I'd ask you to read that when you make your deliberation in full. Otherwise, I'll sure if you'll read it, I won't read it out if you are sure that it will be read. But as I say, the burden, and I'll just say a little bit about that, so that firstly, I'm
Cumulatively had more than your 10 minutes now.
okay. Well, I'll be very short on this last point about burden. In the past, when there was a cumulative impact policy, the burden was on the premise license holder if they wanted to grant a new license that they wouldn't add to cumulative impact. Because there's no cumulative impact policy, your policy of the council is in effect, or government law says that there should be an automatic assumption of grant. Clearly, when residents raise their representation, they will have to discuss this application and how this grant would affect on the licensing objectives. We've heard lots of comment about the past, but it's about this grant, and I hope through this discussion we can have that meaningful discussion, because Licensing Act about now, look forward looking.
Thank you. I've noted the 2 hands online, but I want to come to my colleagues first. We're very much in the discussion phase now. We will ask as many questions as we feel we need to have answers to in order for us to take a decision later tonight. So I have had a request for a comfort break. It is 5 to 8. We have been, many of us, sitting here for more than 2 hours. We'll take a break till 8:05, please. 8:05.
And could you pause the live stream, please?
That's right, just let them open the toilets, are you?
Just bear with me.
20 minutes after the premises closes. To consider that as well. In the guidance, it does say that venues should have a holistic approach to what happens outside. It doesn't say by how far away or whatever, but there is a responsibility, holistic responsibility, to make sure that when people leave the venue, that the SIA people are there to just sort of monitor, guide them away in a safe way. So that's why I would like that condition to be put on there. And I think I'll leave it there, Chair, for the moment. There's quite a number of things there, Mr. Dadds, but you're kind of probably used to that.
Yes, I think I've, through you, Chair, I think I've got most of them there. If I've missed any at the end, just give me a nudge. Firstly, in relation to a condition not to be a nightclub, then of course, yes, we're content to have that condition. In relation to the external area, if I've misunderstood you, I apologise, but there is no live music in external areas. So it was.
What happens out there?
Pardon?
What happens in the external areas? What happens?
It's seating for consumption, in effect, it's drinking, etc. So there's no as you know, under the Live Music Act, you could have live music outside, exempt. You could have a jazz evening out there if you wanted to, which would be exempt under the Act. It doesn't fall within the Licensing Act, but we have no intention for that. But certainly there won't be any live bands externally, Sir Chair. And if there was someone playing just an acoustic guitar or something, that it wouldn't be anything that would cause a nuisance. So I don't want to rule it out completely, but the idea, so I can say that no live bands outside. There used to be 2 in a bar rule, so we could say no more than 2 artists, but I don't think we need to do that because that's deregulated. But if you wanted to put it as a condition, I'm quite happy to accept it. In relation to that area, as I say, it's quite a nice, cool area, and that it wouldn't be disturbing anyone, and the food and drink out there, and we think it will be a nice area for people externally. In regard to SIA, we obviously will do the risk assessment for those, but we've offered SIA. In relation to them remaining, they will remain 30 minutes after closing to ensure effective dispersal. You've already seen by your own evidence in your own report that at the other 2 premises within a minute's walking distance, that the dispersal was effective and appropriate. And we would have a dispersal policy, and we're quite happy. I think I've already written it within the conditions that to have that agreed with the police and licensing service. In relation to training, staff training is very important to us, along with having that supported by accreditation. So we will be working towards getting accredited by Hackney Knights.
Yeah, the question was, Mr. Dadds, how does the venue management test your staff's knowledge?
Yes, I'm just coming to that actually. I'm just going in stages, so that 1 is about the accreditation. 2 is that the management obviously have the knowledge of the policies and procedures. In relation to staff, they have online training through Licensing Connect. So the training on licensing law responsibilities, that's all done online and through a course. And once it's completed, and that's knowledge test, so that's tested through a number of modules, 4 modules, and tested at the end. And the same, it has wave training, so that the welfare vulnerability and engagement training is undertaken, and that's yet again in a number of modules, and part of that is about safety of customers within the premises and safety to making sure that they getting home safely and correctly, and also the premises operates the Licensing Connect system, or will operate the Licensing Connect system, which they have in another of their sites, where there's a vulnerability log, there's an incident reporting log, refusals register, online resources. So members of staff have an app on their phone, and they have all their training, all their policies and procedures accessible by an app. And in addition, they can go back to their training at any time and refresh the various modules if they want to be refreshed. So, and on the training, it has an automatic timing on it that can say that that training is to be done every 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months. So we will refresh the training every 6 months. So there is systems in place to make sure that there's testing of that knowledge and the training, and it's accessible, easy to use, and easy to understand for staff training. I think I covered all the points you asked.
Of just one evening, what will happen?
Yes. Well, we will operate like we would have, we would open probably at lunchtime, we will do food, people can come in, have drink, be like a normal drinking establishment, i.e. a bar or a late night bar, same as we do with the other premises. We will have recorded music, and people can socialise, take a seat or stand, have their drink, have food. So it's a normal drinking establishment. You've been in many, we've all been in many. It's not a nightclub.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Before I bring in Councillor Fajana Thomas, I think we've got a rep we haven't heard from. I believe Hackney resident next to Cargo is Luis Vincente, C5.
Yes, hi. It is me. So I just wanted to say that I live close by. I'm a Hackney resident, and the area has improved significantly since Cargo has closed. Before, it was dangerous, I believe, in particular in the evening after 11 p.m. or so. You didn't have to wait until 3 a.m. for the area to feel dangerous. I will have people visit from outside London, and they will be worried just walking in the area. So this information that the police has kindly provided, I think, should be taken into account. I think it is probably right when they say that 85% of criminality has decreased thanks to Cargo being closed. So I personally have a family, and I actually always felt it was, for me, we need to go home early, and we couldn't stay late around with kids because it could be dangerous. And finally, I walk or cycle through Rivington Street every day. And I was also cycling before when Cargo was open. I never felt very safe because people will be in the street. They will be drunk. Yes, you will have someone at the door, and that person at the door will probably be paying attention to people that go in, but not people going out. And I felt it wasn't safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Councillor Fajana Thomas.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just to follow up on what Councillor Smith asked Mr. Dart, which is around the operation and the policy. And one of the objectors, I remember seeing that in the submission around in the previous management or the previous license, that many patrons usually block the pavement and making it impossible for residents to walk on Rivington Street. Just want to clarify if we are mindful to grant this application, approve this application, what would change from that? And Mr. Dad, I'm mindful that this is not the cargo application and this is not the cargo reopening. This is a different application before us. But as you can see, most of the comment from residents has been based on the operations of cargo in this area, and would be good to hear from you what the experience of residents in terms of if this venue is brought back to a different use from what it has been in the last 1 year, what would change? And that is to Mr. Chair, can I just, and again, picking on some of the objectors, there's been a couple of, as well as the written submission, people saying they were surprised to see Acne Council considering another application from these premises. I think it is important. Maybe I should leave that to Amanda to clarify that we need to, when a valid application is submitted to the council, we have to hear that application, look at that application. I'll leave that to Amanda to explain. And the last thing, Chair, that I want to mention is in terms of some of the language used in this submission. I know you refer to an individual calling an individual not trustworthy. Other thing about people drunk, reducing mental capacity and all of that in some of the submission and some of the comments. I don't think these are appropriate, while I understand that residents are quite sensitive and want to have peace and quiet around their homes. I think there's certain language that is not appropriate in this setting. I'll stop. Actually, before I stop, Chair, Mr. Dad, I'll go straight to my to a very blunt question from you. If we are saying yes, we want to approve this application, but with the 4 hours, would that be something that would be acceptable to you? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think I got most of those questions. One I didn't understand is about not appropriate language, or I didn't quite understand what was being said or asked of me. So
That wasn't for you, was it? That wasn't for Mr. Dadd. That was
Which
just a general comment about the use of language in some of the...
No, yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
for you, just in general.
thank you. Sorry, I couldn't quite understand. So thank you. Thank you for those questions. In relation to having empathy, understanding where the residents are coming from, of course, I'm a resident. I live in a town. I have licensed premises near me. I have empathy, but I have to do my job, and you would be doing your job in recognising that whilst we have maybe an eye on that, the Licensing Act is about now and forward-looking in relation to the objectives. And the point that you raised about reading comments about blocking the street, that will be about now and what will happen going forward. And I've already said in my speaking note that the queuing system would be internally. We believe we have enough room in that courtyard to have people queuing into our system. So I don't believe that we will require any space on the public footpath, because we can queue in a way to get people in. So we've got enough space internally. You could condition it to say no more than 10 people queuing on the highway, no more than 20 people queuing on the highway. I don't think it's required, but you could put that if you wanted to as a condition, because we actually don't think there'll be any queuing. But if someone stands there, waits to come in, or doesn't know how to come in, I don't want to have an offence. But you may say a very short, and we'll have door personnel at the gate where the Banksy is, where people want to come in, have a coffee and have a look around. And we are really predominantly looking at entrance through the external area and egress through the other door. So we are not going to be having queuing on the public highway, not to the extent in any event where there were queues down the road and obstructing the highway. So, Chair, you may want to write a condition like this, that there If there is any queuing, shouldn't be any more than say 20, and in any event, no queuing should obstruct the highway. In relation to the comment about trust, I don't know if that was for me to answer, but I think I've already addressed that by. Okay, thank you. In relation to core hours, I know it was a blunt question, and we couldn't accept that. We have to pay a considerable rent. We have to pay and want to employ staff. We know already that there's a premises on the corner that's recently was acquired. I think they had a license to 2 o'clock, 2:30. Was that right? Yeah. And they opened, done a lot of refit, and they're closed already. The people can't survive. And core hours, people won't survive. And we know people are struggling. Hospitality are on their knees. I don't want anyone to feel sympathetic or whatever, but it is really a difficulty out there. And to pay rent, rates, bills, wages are going up, taxes are going up, and in essence, footfall is through the floor. And for us to be able to pay a rent, which is in effect, and rates of 400,000, we need the hours we've applied for. The reason we've applied those hours are that we are not asking for what we have in all the other venues, which are 3:30, 4 o'clock. We've gone from 2:30 to 3 o'clock, everyone gone, and we looked at the crime stats. And I believe that that is what we seek and what we ask to be granted. I believe I've answered all the questions you had, Councillor.
Yes, you have, but just to, in response to one of your answers around the external area where you mentioned that people were queuing up with being within that external area. In your application, the smoking area is within that external area with 20 people, I think, mentioned 20 people in the smoking area at a time. How would that accommodate each other if that is going to happen?
Councillor, it's a good question. It's a large area. There's more than sufficient space for the smoking area, for queuing, and for people to sit. It's a large area. It can easily be accommodated.
Yes, but Amanda, you also need to just address us on the fact that because many of the residents, you couldn't understand why we're accepting yet another application from this venue. Amanda?
Yes, the council and in particular the licensing authority have to accept any valid application that comes to them, and they have to determine that under Section 17 of the Licensing Act. So they have to act lawfully and consider all applications. It's not a case that they can pick and choose and decide how frequently or how often they accept applications. Some premises do make more than one application, but we have no control over that. We have to hear the applications unless, for example, there were no objections, and then that could be dealt with, approved internally. Otherwise, there is a need to consider each application on its own merits and determine it accordingly.
Can you give us a bit of guidance on, because it's in our papers, the very clear history of both the lead applicant and this venue, and it's been mentioned in all submissions, of the kind of weight that we need to give that when we're taking our decision, please.
Yes, you have to, members will be considering the evidence presented to them today in addition to the representations that have been made, and depending on the level of evidence presented to them, they will be attaching the necessary weight to that in order to make their final decision.
Yeah, I was asking you how much weight we can attribute to the recent, relatively recent operation.
This application was made by a different person, or it's a different application from the last application that was heard in October. So you can only attach, I would say, a limited amount of weight to incidents that may not be relevant to this particular applicant. It's got to be anything that was connected to them at the time. Yes, we will take into members will take into consideration the historic incidents that occurred in the area at the premises, but in terms of the actual applicant, they have to, they can only attach what is relevant to that applicant and what was being dealt with. So, for example, in October, that was a different application from a different person. This is a new application from a different applicant, although there is links to the management of the premises. And so they will have to assess, you know, the different factors that have been presented to them and decide whether or not how they're going to determine the application.
I will let you come back on that, but while Amanda, while you've got the microphone, there was a question from Louise earlier about that condition that came off, and it specifically was about whether a particular company could be involved. It was that condition.
Sorry, it wasn't. It was to do with the DJ, it being described as not a DJ-led venue, and but that would not be enforceable, would be unenforceable due to the Live Music Act if we are under 500 people, which brings me back round to the question of we need really good clarification as to capacity. I've seen 500 and I've seen 550 tonight, and I really need to know which, because that will influence the Live Music Act.
I presume we take the most recent thing that we've had in this hearing as confirmation, which was 550.
Yes, 550 for the fire safety order. In relation to, could I cover a couple of points? I'll be neutral with my opinion because I think I need to do that. In relation to each application's on its own merit, any evidence regarding a previous review, and my learned friend could also comment if he so wishes, you invite him, I would say have limited weight, but weight itself is a matter for the tribunal fact. So we can give you the law to say how much weight you should attribute. I say it should be lesser weight because you're dealing with this application, but weight is a decision for the decision maker. The lawyer can't tell you what the weight is. So it's difficult to answer. So for the lawyer, I hasten to add, in relation to the point of enforceability, DJ-led, those sort of conditions I say can be enforced. I think the point that was being made, and I don't know if it's misunderstood, with the Live Act, you can't, up to 2,300 hours, it's not regulated. So you could have a DJ-led event up to 2,300 hours, that's not enforceable. Unless you, through a review, take away through, I think it's 177A or 173A, the exemptions. But clearly, the premise is you wouldn't have a DJ-led event to 2,300 hours. Generally, they don't happen. You do get some day parties. I expect elsewhere in the city, but generally they're not really those sort of things. They don't really happen that often.
Yes, Chair, just to add on the point of weight, it's probably not to get tied up with weight. There is no principle of law that says just because the evidence is historic or relates to a previous application, you therefore must give it reduced weight or anything like that. I mean, weight just means based on the evidence before you, based on the relevance of the evidence in your mind, how much do you value that evidence? How much does it influence your decision? That's for you to decide. But there is no legal rule that says because these are historic applications, they need to be given less weight, therefore. And I don't think Mr. Debs disagrees with that from what he said. Second point with the DJs, I mean, I'm not sure what the point is here, but I don't think it's been said that they're agreeing to a condition to not have a DJ after 11. I don't think that's the proposition here. And, that is the concern. We're concerned about a venue that's going to have DJs until 3 a.m. because that to us sounds a lot like a nightclub. But I can address that later.
Thank you. And we have had the proposal of a condition not to have to say that this will not be operated as a nightclub, haven't we?
Yep.
And I suppose the question is, what does that mean? And can that mean anything? Louise thinks it doesn't mean anything.
Well, I don't believe a nightclub is defined.
Can you park your thoughts on that? Because I will come back to you. Andrew has been the most patient person all evening. I'm going to bring you in, Andrew.
It's easy to be patient when you're at home. So thank you. Sorry. First, actually, can I start by saying thank you to the council for their hard work, the late hours. The residents know what the council has to do, and it's not the council that brings us here today. So thank you to everybody. I guess I'd like to make a non-legal comment, if I can, about the weight of evidence, and this will be the last thing I say on it. It's that you've heard from nearly 20 residents about their lived experiences of a massive venue in the area. And that's the issue, a massive venue in the area. I urge you to give weight to their truth rather than Mr. Dodd, who says he's walked around so he knows it's not possible to hear inside the venue. I offer the evidence that on multiple occasions, I had to negotiate with the cargo doorman when the thump, thump, thump was banging in our bedroom 100 meters away. That's evidence of the impact of a major venue, any venue, although it happens to be cargo. Just two other points that I swear take no more than 30 seconds. Hospitality is actually not on its knees in Shoreditch. At least 10 restaurants have opened in the past month. 2 of them by my friends, some in spaces abandoned by the Shoreditch Bar Group. What is on its knees is this old Shoreditch Bar Group drinks model because it just imposes too much on the residents. That the new cargo can't survive in core hours, as far as I know, is not one of the core license considerations and actually should be ignored. And then finally, can I also point out what strikes me as a near Kafka-esque argument that we're hearing that says the neighborhood is now safe, so it's safe for the guy who ruined it to move back in. And that's the essence of what we're being asked today. Again, thank you everybody for all of your time.
Thank you, Andrew. Let's come. I've got hands in the room, so I'm going to go. Sorry, I can't remember all your names. I'm going to go to Louise first, and then Rupert, and then I'll come to you and to Jonathan.
Chair, I think we need a lot more clarification on if it's not a nightclub, then what is it? It's 550 people, vertical drinking till 3 a.m. with music, but it's not a nightclub. I'm very, very confused as to what that exactly is. I don't believe there's a legal definition for nightclub, so that's going to make it very difficult to condition against. And that really does concern me. But as a general principle, I don't think this is an operator that we can trust to stay within the boundaries that we define as nightclub. And that's the big problem here. There is no trust between all parties and the applicant because of the history that he's displayed in the past. But I'd really like the clarification around nightclub as a term, as a legal term as well. We've got a lot of legal people in the room. I'm sure they can help us out.
Councillor Smith has found the OED definition. Entertainment venue that's open from the evening until early morning, having facilities such as a bar and a disco or other entertainment. You're contending that, as applied for, that fits that definition of a nightclub. Okay, we'll come back to you, but I've got Rupert and I've got Suzanne and I've got Jonathan.
Yeah, I just want to sort of reiterate that point that I don't need a Google definition of what a nightclub is. The council, whatever it is, barrister, literally described the nightclub. It's open till 3 a.m. I can guarantee you 100% there's no one standing or sitting around just like he described. They'll be dancing, they'll be going crazy, they'll be plied with alcohol, and they'll be plied with drugs. I've been to enough nightclubs around London, around the world to know what happens in nightclubs. This is a nightclub, 100%. I'd also like to say, just to confirm, the Shoreditch nighttime economy is amazing. And it's amazing because there isn't bars like Cargo. There's restaurants opening up, there's hotels opening up, there's cocktail bars opening up, there's all these things happening. He's so concerned about the nighttime economy. Don't be, it is wonderful. I think that was, and yeah, and the other thing I just want to address is like, he's saying that DJ events don't happen before 11 p.m. As a DJ and as someone who loves going out, I can guarantee you that DJ events happen before 11 p.m. They happen all over London, they happen all over the UK, they happen all over the world. If this is granted, there will be DJs before 11 p.m. and after 11 p.m. That I can assure you. And you might say it's not going to happen after 11 p.m. because there's not going to be like a DJ there, but they'll be hidden up the back.
Could you use the term the applicant's solicitor? Or
Sorry, this is the first time I've done this.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you.
guy sitting over there. The guy that doesn't know anything about nightclubs.
Thank you. Suzanne.
Yeah, I have another evidence which I didn't bring up earlier. So it's not just my own personal trailing of your patrons to Cargo previously, but Tower Hamlets Park Guards, which is the Tower Hamlets employed policing on our estate, actually did a survey when Cargo was open, trailing all your people coming from as far as Croydon, going to Cargo to party and have drugs after that on our estate. So there's a set of evidence that trace that all the people that were partying on Arnold Circus and Boundary Estate came because they came to Cargo. And if you're talking about having coffee for 20 people outside in the middle of the night at 3 a.m., it is really confusing. And I'm really glad that, you know, other residents here, I'm sitting here really confused. What concept are you talking about? We won't need to have a coffee in Cargo at 3 or 4 a.m. at night. The other thing is that you mentioned just now about the financial viability. It is quite clear the model that was operated previously by Cargo is to sell booze at really cheap prices, pack them all in, more than 550 capacities, spilling all out into not just Rivington Street, but the police has evidence that it was spilling all out onto the Shoreditch High Street, causing, we can't even walk the pavements. They were all spilling onto the main road. We witnessed all the cars, we've got all the photos, the videos, and everything to show you. So you say 550 inside, 20 people smoking outside, having a little coffee. We saw worse than that. So I think also when you mention 145 Shoreditch High Street, that is a smaller outfit. So we know we live there, so that's much smaller. It's not a good comparison at all. If you need to make a lot of money, you will probably go back to the same model. So please do not approve this.
Jonathan.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, go for it.
Okay, I'll just first of all pick up on that point. As the Mr. Daz, the barrister, has said, there is an economic model that works and an economic model that doesn't work for that venue. The only economic model that works is the Cargo model. That's the only one that has worked, has been the Cargo model. This operator knows how to run that kind of venue, and we've seen what a disaster that is for everyone around there. But of course, once the license is granted, that's the economic model that he will have to go to make it work. Now, a few other points I've got are, one is back to evidence. The question of when the road closures happened was raised. Now, the roads were closed, this is Arnold Circus, was closed to through traffic, which itself was a problem before the road closures. They were closed in or before September 2020. Cargo continued to operate for another year. The particular day which triggered evidence that enabled the police to bring the review, happened on 6th of September 2021. This is 1 year after the road closures. It was a Monday. It was mayhem. We were aware of at least 6 separate police reports. There were probably another dozen more than that we don't know about. This was a Monday night. Cargo was the only big venue operating on that night. The evidence was clear, and it has nothing to do with the road closures. Another couple of things, I don't think was two things that weren't mentioned in terms, but have been documented in terms of effects on residents. One is drug taking that looks like people snorting lines of cocaine from windowsills of children's bedrooms on the Boundary Estate at 3 in the morning. Another one was incredible amounts of public urination. Now, there's one family that particularly affected Virginia Road. There's one family that had pretty much lived there all their lives that were forced to move. They moved home. They moved out of Tower Hamlets because of that problem on Virginia Road. Now, they moved early in 2022, and Natalie, who was the resident there, who was busy moving, I asked her how she'd been affected by urination since Cargo was closed, which was in late autumn, stopped trading in late autumn 2021. And she said, oh, urination, oh, the problem's gone away. I mean, these were very, very marked and immediate effects of Cargo closing. I remember the first weekend it wasn't operating, residents were saying, what's going on? We could sleep that weekend. And we backtracked and worked out what was going on was Cargo hadn't opened that weekend. The evidence is indisputable. I've got a question which goes back to the hearing late last year, which was William Knowles Moffat's license. Much discussed at that hearing was the question of whether or not this applicant would be involved in that business. Certainly at the meeting that we attended, it seemed to be quite a pivotal issue to lead to a decision to grant a license. So I was really surprised when the license that actually came out removed that condition. And I did ask at the time licensing officers who told me, I think that was a phone call, said that they felt that it's something that just couldn't be policed. The question's coming up again about the involvement of the operation in the business. And obviously it seems clear from that one that there's nothing we can do about who gets to run the business. But I wouldn't mind some input from perhaps legal on that one, on how that, at what point did that condition get dropped, how that works? Because we're all here in a public meeting discussing this application, but it seemed that things change after the meeting's over.
I will, Amanda, come to you on that, and then I've got Louise and Alexis, and then I want people to start thinking about, is there anything new that they want to raise? And I want my colleagues to start thinking about final questions that they'll need to help us get to a decision. But so there was a condition on the existing license for the premises that's within core hours that Mr. Knowles Moffat said Mr. Khan couldn't be involved in the running of that business that we just took off.
It was condition 54, as I recall.
There we are.
My understanding is that it wasn't an enforceable condition, and therefore they had to remove it because of the issues of enforceability, not being able to monitor it closely, and not, not having resources to ensure that that doesn't happen. It is difficult for us to manage and monitor the management of the premises at any one time. So I think it was just difficult to keep that on condition on the premises license when we couldn't take sufficient enforcement action against it.
And that is a requirement of the Licensing Act, isn't it? A condition must be enforceable.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if I could just follow up on that, why wasn't that mentioned at the public meeting? It should have come up at the meeting, surely. And one point, and the other point is this lack of enforceability, I think, is a real hard practical issue, which I think, to be honest, I don't see how the licensing officers can enforce the kind of enforcement that would be required to keep cargo on the straight and narrow, especially with this operator.
Thank you. I can't, we're not going into the whys and wherefores of other hearings. We can't do that here. I think that's fair enough, isn't it? Yeah. And I suppose the blunt answer is nobody in the room at the time raised it and said, "Oh, hold on, that's unenforceable." And it happened afterwards when officers went through and were writing out the application and the license. But I think we can apologise for that and say that perhaps somebody at the time should have mentioned it then. I know you've got some questions. No, but I've promised Louise, haven't I? I've promised Louise and Alexis. Louise first.
Chair, I'm just going to cycle back to that condition problem from MKN Resources, mainly to put it on public record. It was a pre-agreed condition between the applicant, MKN Resources, and the police. It was published well before it came into the hearing. There was a lot of opportunity for people to find problems with it. And it was pre-agreed between applicant and the police. And then licensing officers decided that they couldn't actually enforce it. I find that worrying, that a police proposed condition then gets overwritten by licensing officers. That's where the crux of that problem actually sits. And that's why this bank of residents are very, very concerned about licensing process at the moment. So that's an aside, but it needed to go on public record. My actual question really goes back to dispersal at the venue. This evening we've heard quite a lot about the 100-metre radius. Within that 100-metre radius, there are 2 public bus stops. That's it. So everybody else has to walk outside of the 100-metre radius to find some form of transport home, whether that's from a car pickup and an Uber, public transport, or down to the tube and find the night buses home. The 100-metre radius, actually, 2 bus stops are within that area. So the dispersal policy, people are going to leave that 100-metre radius, which means that basically the 100-metre radius is just a bit of a nonsense, really. And that's why we do end up with a lot of people over in the boundary estate. Do you want me to sort of launch into a summary?
No, because I will come to you when we're actually at summary phase, and we're not at summary phase yet. I definitely want to hear from Alexis and from Mr. Dadds about nightclub and dispersal before we get anywhere close to that. Alexis.
Hi, thank you. This is just a further emphasis because I just want to address an issue that has been mentioned briefly. This isn't just a normal late night bar or nightclub. At 550, it will be one of the largest venues in zone 1 or 2 in London that will be operating until 3 o'clock in the morning and serving alcohol. You are licensing tonight one of the largest nighttime venues in the City of London. So it is a really important issue. And about dispersal, I would like to ask, because we have the security gentleman here and he has referred to the other 2 nightclubs that Mr. Khan operates opposite the Archers. You like the 100-meter radius. Has at any time in the operation of the other 2 nightclubs, has any of Mr. Khan's security ever operated within the 95 meters beyond the 5 meters in front of the front door of these 2 venues?
Mr. Dadds, come to you now. You've got questions as well later, haven't you? Yeah. But Mr. Dadds.
Yeah.
So
I think I should be able to sweep up on and answer some of those points, may I?
Yep.
Yep. So I'm not going to get into other applications and whether conditions are enforceable or not. I don't think that's for me. I've got to deal with this application. If you want me to, I can, you know, I could talk all day. And I won't. And as the other gentleman said, I'm highly paid, so I'm paid by the minute, so I can talk if you like. Only joking. I have a thing to you. In relation to the issue regarding dispersal, a dispersal plan will be agreed on, as I said, with the police and licensing authority. And the observations are of our other two premises within very short distance that the dispersal is effective. The circumference of the circle is being misunderstood. I think I've made it quite clear why it's been drawn. It's been drawn to say the activities inside won't affect anyone within that circle. We've got noise limiter, we'll have security, we'll manage that area. So within that, you would hear anyone about can they see it, hear it, or affected by it? And I argue that's the purpose of that. Of course, people have got to come from that and disperse. And whether they go by public transport, Uber, a hackney carriage, by public railway, then clearly people will move. The other point that I said earlier on is that once away from the premises, it is a matter of personal responsibility. Now, where that distance is a matter of judgment, of course. But what I say, and I accept Councillor Smith's point, is that we can still educate and guide, promote good behaviour, direct people in the right way, and be responsible. And I think the evidence for that is that Lighthouse and our premises around the corner, literally 8 buildings away at 145, we operate already as a late night bar. If you give that description of a nightclub, you could say, well, that's no, we know what it is. It's difficult to describe and define. I understand that. But one of the factors of nightclub generally, and the gentleman said I act for actually some of the top nightclubs in London, so I certainly do know what a nightclub looks like, and I know what a bar looks like. Both would fit into the definition potentially because the way the Licensing Act has changed. But a lot of the nightclubs generally these days are external promoted events. So they have external DJs coming in. So I think if you look at the Village, which is nearby in this area, if you look at their program, they've got people coming in externally doing concerts, music, DJs. And generally the distinction is that a nightclub will have an external promoted event and sell tickets for that event. That's one of the biggest, I think, distinctions. But we all know what a late night bar is, and we know what a nightclub is. You know, those sticky floors, and it's dark, and it's just a big dance floor. We are running a bar, and we're happy to have a condition that says it's not a nightclub. Obviously, it's down to understanding, interpretation, and enforceability. But I think we know the difference, and certainly I'm quite happy to say no external promoters, so that it's clear unequivocally we're not going to a nightclub. The other thing that I was going to say, yes, a lot of the promoters and promoted events and nightclubs generally are selling tickets online and alike. So we can talk about no ticket sales online. I think that might be excluding if you have certain events where it might be cinema, or we do have some events at the other premises where people come in and they might do dancing or whatever. We do salsa, so we use space for public dancing clubs and dance. So we do use that, and those spaces are very important. So I wouldn't want to, so when you bear in mind, if you are going to condition it, make sure you're not excluding those unintended consequences of those types of activity. In relation to the point of the gentleman talked about the thudding, thud on noise, obviously the noise limiter. And actually the noise limiter will be an important exercise with environmental health, because the noise limiter also will have an impact on what the volume of the sound will be. So I can't give you the answer now, but the council can set the noise limiter accordingly to what would be a typical for a bar. A nightclub, I can't tell you, I think it's about 101 and 103 dBA. I think a restaurant, the good guy says a restaurant, I think is 80. A pub bar is around 93, 95. And a nightclub, I think, is about 103. Now, the difference between 93 and 103 is 10 decibels, but the difference is a doubling of sound. So that's the difference. So the noise limiter is also a mechanism of way of control. I don't know how to answer that tonight, but I want to say that that's another feature. I believe I've captured everything that people say. I'm not repeating this application on its own merits. In my speaking note, I made it quite clear that the paragraph 26 is about forward-looking.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. You sort of covered a little bit about what I'm thinking about, which is kind of this idea of a normal drinking establishment. You know, you've spoken about that, but the police have said in their submission that the premises has continued to operate under Mr. Knowles Mofford without concern. And the hours there are core hours. So my question is to the police, do you think that's an important factor in all of this is the time that venue has to shut? Because you're not concerned about that venue, which is operating at the moment. So is the time constraint, is that what is making it safe there, is the question. And just, Mr. Dadds, it's very clear, really. You've heard from the police, you've heard from all these residents, you've heard from licensing, that they're deeply troubled about these hours. And you've said that you're not willing to go to core hours. I can kind of understand that. But I do think that you're going to have to compromise here. And I will just put it out there. I think core hours at the moment are 11, 12, 11, or sorry, 10:30. I think an extra hour on top of those would be certainly all that I would be prepared to give.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Well, first thing to say is that our only issue isn't just with the hours. I mean, that would be part of it. Our issue is with it being a nightclub. And the elements of the nightclub they include the fact that it goes until 3 a.m. They also include the fact that it has big dance floors, capacity of 550 people, drinking until 3 a.m., live and recorded music. So yes, it would assuage our concerns to some extent if one of the elements of the nightclub were removed and it was in core hours, but you still have a problem as the other elements of the nightclub. And just talking about the current premises in place there, it is important to understand that is not a nightclub. It's an event space, as I understand it, is for things like brand activation and launch parties, fundamentally of a different character to a nightclub or even to a bar, really. We're happy with that kind of venue that doesn't pose a high risk to the licensing objectives. It's fundamentally different in terms of risk to licensing objectives to a nightclub. So that's why we don't have concerns with that. And to just be as clear as I can, even if, I've said this before really, but even if you do reduce the hours to the core hours, we would still be very unhappy with this application from a police perspective, from a licensing objective perspective, from a crime perspective, we would be strongly opposed still.
Yes, Mr. Dadds, because you've had a very clear question from Councillor Smith then about hours.
Councillor Smith, you and I do try and reach a compromise or a meeting of minds, and unfortunately, on you saying you at the moment it's a provisional thought that you have at 1 o'clock. I couldn't agree with that, and the reason why I say that is a number of factors. Firstly, any decision you make must be based on the evidence, and I think within the PAC and submissions. The statutory guidance at 9.43 says that any determination should be evidence-based, justified of being appropriate and proportionate to promote the licensing objectives. The burden, so the legal test, the burden is on the police to show that we would undermine the licensing objectives. It's not on us, it's not a cumulative impact area, so the burden falls on us. The burden falls squarely on the police. What the police say is that there will be serious crime and that there's already serious crime in the area, and also about trust and confidence of the operator. And the evidence doesn't support those assertions. The reason why is that just around the corner, 8 doors, within months, they've granted a new license to 4 o'clock to us. So about confidence, trust, they've granted it. Eight buildings away, they've granted 4 o'clock. We're asking for 2:30, 3 o'clock. So that doesn't sit consistently with their evidence. And that's evidence which is before you. The other point is that we have 2 other premises granted licenses recently. So that goes to the point about confidence, trust. The police, on one objective, the committee decided, and the other they negotiated out. We have other premises in the borough that we operate and operate well as a bar. All of them are much later than this application. This will be the lowest. We've compromised insofar as we've already only applied for, in effect, the lowest hours of all the other establishments that we have. In relation to crime, the only evidence that they have put before you immediately in that area is that list, the Excel spreadsheet we had in a couple of days. I've asked for the underlining reports. The officer says they won't provide them, can't provide them because of time. Time wasn't my concern. They've only just served it, and it was a reasonable question that I was asked. If the officer is using their common system, Common Connect system, then they would have had the analysis and been able to give them to us. They know we would ask. They haven't provided it. So that puts us to a disadvantage. But in any event, they have said out of 14 months, so from December to now, over 14 months, they've only produced between 2 o'clock and 3:30, 9 crimes. It's about one crime for about 6 weeks. That's it. They've not provided any other data. In fact, their data shows that crime has dramatically fallen in the area. Your own policy says they do not know why crime has fallen in a single area. There's no particular single data set that shows why, and there's multiple reasons. A lot of it is to do with post-pandemic, people working from home, and you've got 1 million people, roughly less footfall a month in the area. So people are not going out after work, people are not coming into the area as much. There's a dramatic fall in footfall. So what I'm saying is we'd already have a premises, literally a few doors one way, 8 doors the other, operating safely, promoting the licensing objectives, granted only within a few months, 4 o'clock. This application, based on evidence, can be promoted. So what the police say can be rebutted by the evidence that I've just said and pointed to you, which outdoes that submission, and it should be granted. Now, I would ask for 2:30 to 3. The only compromise, and I don't want to compromise, we want those hours, but if you pulled it back to 2 to 2:30, that would be the very least that we could work with. The premises on the corner has recently been refurbished, opened and shut, can't make it work. They can't make it work. And I'm saying we want to make it work. It's a great space, we want to make it work, we want to bring a nice bar and a nice atmosphere there. And we're not going backwards, we're looking to go forward.
I've got a couple of hands in the room. I've got a point of clarification. I'm asking people to really think about, is there anything else you think we need to think about in our deliberations? And then I'm going to come to short summings up from people. I had Suzanne, then Alexis in the room.
Yes.
Mr. Soleimani. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just to directly respond to a point from Mr. Dash.
Sorry, yeah, you can come straight back now.
Thank you. Yes, and it's been repeatedly said that we made representations about these other venues and they've been allowed with later opening times. I think the short point is essentially they're much smaller venues with a very different character to what's being proposed. They're not 550 capacity nightclubs. I think PC Griggs can explain that.
Yeah,
Sorry. Traffic we're talking about is approximately 200, Fareepa is about 350, Lighthouse is 300, and I think the Shoreditch is about 250. So they're much smaller venues. The Shoreditch around the corner is over 250. We spoke and we negotiated that one. Traffic, we reduced the hours that they applied for. And as you heard, Fareepa went to a subcommittee. They are much smaller venues. They're not on this stretch of Rivington Street, which itself is just, has been historically an issue. Although they're talking about capacity of being 550, it's got room for 750 in there, and that's what it used to be when it was operating as cargoes. The actual capacity in there is much bigger. 550 was put on it as part of the consent order, and it was changed to the viaduct. I think that's, I covered those bits.
And just on this question of trust and the trust of the operator, I mean, two things to say about that. One, it is the police's evidence, our firm view, that we don't trust this operator. And we can't, the fact that every application that's proposed by this person, we don't dogmatically try and reject. That doesn't mean that we trust them. That means the police are taking a fair approach to every application that comes before them.
Sorry, no, Mr. Dad, sorry, no. You know you don't interrupt someone else. Thank you, stop, please. Thank you, Mr. Soleimani.
The evidence is what the police have said, that they don't trust this operator. But the other evidence that supports that is the fact this committee has repeatedly said that it doesn't trust this operator in its decisions, where it said the key reason why it revoked the first license and why it revoked the second license was because the premises were poorly managed by the same person who's applying for the license today. That is an issue of trust. That is the evidence for the problem of trust. So we are very firmly of the view that trust is a real issue here. It continues to be an issue for this committee, as it was at the previous two revocation hearings.
Thank you. We'll come, but I'm not going to, we'll be here all night if you just ping pong back to each other, and I'm not going to do a who has the last word competition. So yes, address it in your closing remarks. I will come to both my fellow colleague councillors, but at the top I've got Theo.
Just going back to the applicant again, what they've mentioned 3 times this evening is how competent they are at managing small bars. They are not saying, they haven't mentioned that they are literally 10% of the size. So how are they in the same league as cargo? They're not, and it's not personally about them. That venue is too big for the area. That's it. That venue is too big for what Shoreditch has become. We've got a fantastic hotel that's just opened there, 350 room capacity on the same street. And I spoke to the manager last night. No problems. They have a function upstairs for 150. A cinema. So in terms of many things, you can't compare what this applicant is running with their existing premises, which are small little bars, compared to what the capacity of cargo is. It's just, you can't, it's night and day, you know, to talk about how well they manage a small bar, which incidentally is the Shoreditch and the Lighthouse, which has been mentioned. They cannot be compared in the volume that the other place holds. That is the problem. It's purely a dispersion. It's not how well it's managed. It's when those places close at 3 or 4 in the morning. That's the problem. The fact that they're applying for for an extended hours of license for this large venue. That's the problem. It's that dispersion of 570, I believe you're asking for now. 570 versus 50 people coming out of the other bar. It's 10 times the volume of people coming out past their 100-metre circle into Boundary Estate, all those areas. That's the problem. It's two things. It's dispersion of a large volume of people. That is it. There is no personal grudges here against the management. It's that Mr. Khan is a businessman. He's got the biggest venue in Shoreditch, and Shoreditch has evolved. It's evolved. The nighttime economy is doing very well. Big restaurants have opened. Big chains are looking to secure premises in Shoreditch. To say that the nighttime economy is dying, footfall is dying, this is absolute nonsense. I've lived there, everyone's here, lived here for at least 5-10 years. Business is booming in Shoreditch. Business is booming. Just not little crappy bars are doing well, but good restaurants are doing well. Hotels are doing very well. Even the big building opposite Cargo, the black and white building, which won the Reba Award, has got an 80% capacity in their first year because I use it as an office. And they say we're 80% of capacity, which is unheard of. So don't tell me that Shoreditch isn't doing well. It is booming. It's evolving. It's changing. That's the thing I think that you guys, obviously, if you don't live there, you don't know. It is evolving. And we as residents, we can see the difference, and we stay there, but it's the evolving side. That's what I think needs to be noted here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fitzgerald Thomas, then Councillor Smith.
Thanks very much, Chair. I've got two questions, and one of them is to the police and the licensing authority. I know in the police submission there is the sentence of being happy with the current license and the way the premises is being operated. But going back to that, in the last 1 year, there's been a few tent applications in that premises, and two of them you've had outside of the core hours. One of them was actually until 3 a.m. And I just want to find out whether there's been any issue with those tents and those events. Then my second question is to Mr. Dad. Is just to follow up on what Councillor Smith was saying around the hours. I know you have made your position clear that with Councillor Smith's suggestion that if we are mindful to approve this application and we said we want to offer up to 1 a.m. You said no, but I just want to ask you, not just the 1 a.m. you mentioned 2:30. Can I believe what you are referring to as 2:30 is the minimum hour you can accept? That would be the Thursday through Saturday. And the other days, Monday to Thursday, they're actually outside of the core hours as well. They're up to 1 a.m. So what happened to that? I think with what you've heard from the police, licensing authority, and resident here tonight will be challenging as us, the committee, to grant and any timing or hours that goes up to 3:30 or even Monday to Friday, or sorry, Monday to Wednesday over the core hours. So would you like to comment on that, please? Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Smith, you asked this question for him, because he was going to ask that as well. Amanda, have you had time to pull up the 10s? No, it's all right. We'll wait for that to load, and I'll get Mr. Dads to answer Councillor Fitzgerald Thomas's point.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. There is a statutory scheme and structure law on decision making. It has to be evidence-based. You have a structure. It isn't a negotiation. Well, we sometimes have negotiation, but that's if it's agreed. You can have a negotiation. If it's not agreed, then you have a structure. And I do actually welcome Councillor Smith's input in telling us how he's feeling or thinking provisionally. He hasn't made his mind up. He keeps an open mind, and sometimes that's helpful. And we can do that, have that discussion. And likewise, I know I've been here many years that I will say back and tell you what we're thinking. The point that I make is that we already in relation to what we currently do, have licenses in the area, and those hours are beyond core and they've been granted recently. There's no cumulative impact policy. So the burden is on the residents and the police to show that this application, so this one, not cargo, I think back, this one, with this company, this operator, this DPS that's already in a late night venue, and yes, and that one of the largest capacity that we have is 350. But there would have to be evidence to show that 350 to 550, remember that's maximum capacity, it doesn't mean you're at that capacity. I mean, we'll be grateful if we were at that capacity, but the reality is, when you talk about maximum, it is a maximum, but it's not actually. The reality is, if you go round to most of the bars, that gentleman said, and I don't like the description, he said, crappy little bars, they won't be at full capacity. I think that is a derogatory term. People are hardworking, and bars, different bars across London and the city are doing their best. Yes, okay, residents might like it turning to the, yeah, okay. So coming back to the point of the hours, is that it would be, it has to be evidence-based. We know the crime stats that the police have provided, and we know the hours. If you say 1 o'clock, you would have to point to evidence why 1 o'clock is acceptable, but 1:15 isn't, or 2 o'clock isn't, or 2:30 isn't. You would have to have evidence. And if you look at the crime stats of the numbers, between 2 and 3:30, it's only 9 in 14 months. So that's the crime data. But that's the burden is on them. It's not a cumulative impact. We don't have to argue that. The presumption is that we will be granted it only if you hear that the police say overwhelmingly between those hours you cannot grant it because there will be a prevention of crime disorder, or the objective would be undermined. And it's arbitrary. I would say it was arbitrary just to pick 1 o'clock. You'd have to look at the evidence why. You could say you've got your policy, but your policy is not tram lines, it's a guide, and you've already got premises outside in this area, outside of policy, and I want to make it work. So I would ask you, where is the evidence regarding this application being a bar, moving forward? I've offered a number of avenues whether you can restrict it. Where is the evidence to say 1 o'clock is more preferred than now 2:33? And I would say 2:33 is what we want. I did say minimum is 2, everyone can buy 2:30, but really we want 2:30 to 3 so that the bar can work. Thank you.
Thank you. PC Griggs? Best you can.
Yeah, no, say even in the agenda pack, it's got the dates of the 10s over the last 12 months in there. The latest one was on the 13th of December that ran till 3 o'clock. The rest of them all ran to either midnight. It was 1 o'clock in the summer, and the rest of them have been midnight or 10 p.m. The earlier ones were to cover events before they got their premises license. The 2 later ones, were part of installations and events that were being run by the current license holder, and we've had no issues with how he's run the premises or the temporary event notices that he has run at that site.
Thank you.
Just one small point, Chair. It's been repeatedly said that there's a presumption that you are to grant this application. Can I just ask your legal advisor through you whether she agrees with that? Because it's not a proposition of law I'm familiar with.
No, I don't agree. I think that members have to consider the evidence and make a judgment and balance. It's a balancing act as to whether or not they're persuaded, based on the evidence presented to them today, as to whether or not they would grant the premises license or not. However, I accept what Mr. Dadd says in that there does need to be some evidence presented. So members will have to balance what they've heard today.
Mr. Dadd, I understood you simply to be referring to the fact that the legislation is essentially and was set up to be permissive.
Yes, it is. It is permissive, and if there
we need to give reasons if we don't grant an application. They need to be evidence-based reasons.
Could I just explain in 60 seconds so it's even clearer? I think you've got it, but 60 seconds. I'll do it. If no representations are made, grant. If representations are made, then the burden falls on the person making the representation why it shouldn't be granted a presumption. So the burden is on those, and they have to provide evidence that why that application being made by that individual at that time looking forward will undermine the licensing objective. The burden is on them, not on us, and you'll look at the evidence.
Yeah, no, I'm content. I've heard enough about the difference in the size of the venues, and how what's in front of us might be determined. I'm looking to my colleagues now to see there. Do you think you've got enough? No, you've got another question. Go.
Yeah, just on engagement with residents and resolving problems going forward. How do you plan to do that?
We would be quite happy to share our contact details with the residents associations and members. We would obviously advertise way of contacting us, and then obviously that can be recorded on our Licensing Connect system. So we would fully engage. We do at our other premises. As I say, we have no matters arising. The gentleman talks about the hotel around the corner. That's directly opposite our venue, that's 4 o'clock. And we operate in harmony with them very well and our neighbours. And that will continue here if we granted the licence. Thank you, sir.
Any further questions, colleagues? Anything else you need to know? No? Any new points? Yes, Suzanne?
Yes, I disagree that you say the evidence should be us. We are the evidence. We won't be here tonight if it's not impacting our lives. We are the evidence. The other thing is that it is your responsibility to prove that your business model is not going to be the same. And we haven't got that proof tonight. We have been sitting here confused between a nightclub, a pub with dancing, with music, and up to 3 a.m. demands. You know, so we have not been convinced with your evidence. We've been confused. And since one of the councillors raised that, what if we grant this application? So, you know, as a resident in a democratic society, what if we don't grant this application? What would happen to the existing license? The fact that William Moffat said that he has got nothing to do with this group, but yet, less than a year after he got that license, we are now facing this issue. As a layperson, I'm totally confused that there's a license that belongs to Will Moffat, and now there is a new license that is trying to come at us and waste all our time. So I think, what if we don't grant this application? We should start to re-look at what Will has had, even though he seemed to be complying. I have gone to and fro Rivington Street to just check on how many times he has rented the place. He hasn't really used the space. So last night he put on an event, probably waiting to sell off his license to this group. So I think there should be a penalty for wasting all our time. So something should happen to 83 Rivington Street, the premise that you said we should focus on, and we are focusing on. So let's not deviate to the 4 other premises that you are fortunate to have, or your client is fortunate to have. You know, you can continue having that, but 83 Rivington Street is the one that we're talking about, and we are not convinced with what you have presented that you're not going to cut and paste the same model that we had previously, and we are the evidence here tonight.
Yep. I'm taking that as a statement, not a question. I'm not coming back to you on it. Louise?
Really short question. Could you tell me how many objections you've had tonight and how many supporters you've had tonight?
There were 118 objectors in total. We weren't aware of any in support.
So 118 objecting and 0 support?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, there was one in support.
There was one in support.
And 117.
Sorry, it was, thank you. Sorry, I can't remember your name. Nicholas, go for it.
I just wanted to make a very standard point here, as the gentleman mentioned, you know, Shoreditch is evolving and people all over Shoreditch to this day go out for drinks, go out for meals, go out for salsa, go out for coffees, and they go home peacefully. And people go to certain venues, such as the hotels, the cafes, the bars, for certain reasons. And the same applies here with cargo. People went to this venue for a particular reason, and it was to cause havoc, get crazy, and be reckless to the community. And it's the same clientele that are going to be, you know, abiding by the 2, 3, 4 a.m. license that are going to be making these guys money and causing the same issues. So I just wanted to make a point here. It's about a reputation thing. You know, this club is under the arches. It's, you know, a bit alluring. It's, you know, down the back alley, under the train tracks, and it attracts a certain type of clientele. So to sit here and say that those people are going to be now coming for coffees and watching movies and going for salsa is just delusional. They're going to be coming back and wanting to have the same level of service, which is to stay until 3, 4 a.m. and then repeat the same issues that have been repeated. So yeah, I just wanted to make that point, really.
Thank you. I'm seeing no hands. Jonathan, I am going to come to you for a summing up. Do you want to, is it something that could be contained in that? Okay, I'll come for summing up. So for all the resident reps, I'm going to rely on Jonathan as an elected tenants rep and Louise as a tenants rep, and ask you to in a couple of minutes, each of you, just summarize exactly where we're at, and then I'll come to Mr. Riviere, Mr. Molinari, and I'll finish with you, Mr. Dad. So, Jonathan.
Yeah, as a further example of the lengths that we and our Hamlets Council had to go to combat this one venue, the free car park issue on the Boundary Estate, we had to lobby and campaign the council successfully to introduce the toughest parking controls in the borough, which is 24-hour resident-only parking bays. They are, I mean, thankfully, they are actually, there is ticketing activity up until 2 in the morning, but only up until 2 in the morning. And in our experience, it seems that a lot of these partygoers treat the ticket as part of the cost of a night out. But it, you know, we had to go to these kind of lengths. Now, there's been talk about dispersal policy and about conditions and about this great red circle. Any kind of conditions on dispersal policy can't affect what happens on the Boundary Estate. And no amount of staff training can determine what happens on the Boundary Estate and after the venue is closed. No amount of conditions as to what happens inside the venue will alleviate our negative experience outside of the red circle on the Boundary Estate and in other directions. While it's accepted that applications have to be heard, which is why we're here, the constant attempts by this applicant, 2 revocations, 2 appeals, attempts to confuse us with other operators, feels to us like abusive behaviour towards residents. And to then further insist this evening and remind us even that the burden of proof is on us to provide evidence against future problems is egregious, and ignores the pages and pages of very solid evidence that we have provided. Given the history and pattern of behaviour of this operator in this room, it is a given that if any license is granted tonight, we will be back in this room within a year. We will be back. The applicant will be asking for variations, and all of our time will be wasted again and again, and not to we haven't mentioned the stress, the mental health issues for people on the estate every time this comes up. Residents' lives shouldn't be treated in this way as an experiment. Let's not give out the license and see how it goes. You know, enough is enough. The applicant in the summary said the applicant seeks to work with its immediate neighbours and seeks to connect with the local community. Well, given the history of abuse, why, I would ask, would our local community want to ever connect with you? Thanks.
Thank you, Jonathan. Louise.
Over the course of the evening, all of us have been asked to consider the applicant's reputation in running Floripa traffic and Shoreditch. However, we've been asked to discount his reputation in his history of running cargo. We've been asked to do it both ways. We have to consider his reputation as being good for 3 venues, but then ignore the fact that he's in fact had 2 revocations on this very venue. With regards to evidence, the police have put forward really good data-based evidence. We have already had 2 previous hearings, which have resulted in revocations. We have had a serious head injury committed in the venue to a member of the public, something he's never going to get over. This is going to be a nightclub. It's 550 people exiting at 4 AM every weekend. And when they exit and they disperse, they will leave the very safe 100 meters that we've had this evening, and they will disperse into residential streets all over Shoreditch because they'll be looking for their way home. And the placement of this venue in Shoreditch is very challenging from a public transport late night point of view. It is a very difficult venue to get away from. If you walk north up Curtin Road, there is no bus service that will pick you up. If you walk south onto Shoreditch High Street, you will find services that will pick you up. But your walk to the tube is quite a long way. It's a good 10 minutes. That's if you don't get lost because you're a bit drunk. And believe me, I do find an enormous amount of people who are very lost. I'm concerned that the SIA will be determined by risk assessment by the venue themselves. As we've already established, this is a venue operator that has problems with trust. It has problems with trust with its partners, with partners in the council and partners in the police. The problem that it has with residents is just well off the charts as well. But the official partners, the ones who don't have to live it 24 hours a day, are also saying that there are problems with trust in this venue. His reputation is going before him. And as much as Mr. Dodds will say that we need to ignore that, he's also wanting us to remember that he operates other venues in the area and that they're fine and successful. Those 3 other venues, the police also raised objections to when they came before this licensing committee. They were overruled and those hours extended, often by negotiation, much as it was started to happen this evening. I'm very uncomfortable with hours being negotiated in that fashion. I think it just becomes a bit of a bun fight, to be honest. And I don't think that proper consideration is actually being given at that point. The headline summary for this venue is, if it reopens in any form under the auspices of the applicant, we are going to be extraordinarily unhappy. There is no set of conditions which are going to take away the reputation of this manager, of this owner. There are no set of conditions, and the police have said the same, there are no set of conditions which is going to satisfy the residents that this operator can operate and keep the 4 licensing objectives safe and our community safe from him. The 4 licensing objectives are there to protect children, public safety, people from harm, I can't remember what the 4th one is, public nuisance. He's going to hit all 4 of those because he already has. We know he has. We've had such a long association with this operator over certainly my 17 years of being in Shoreditch. We are really experienced in how he manages his venues, and we are exceptionally experienced in how he manages 83 Rivington Street. It's always, there's a lot of people referring to it as cargo tonight, but it is 83 Rivington Street legally on this set of paperwork. Don't do it. You're going to wreck our community. We have moved on. Shoreditch has moved on. We're becoming something new. Do not take us back a decade. It would just be awful.
Thank you. Mr. Riviere.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and sum up as quick as I can. I'll start first because obviously you're well aware of LP3 core hours, which is that better? Yeah. So you're obviously well aware of LP3 core hours, which is still an issue for us. It's been mentioned that there's no cumulative impact area or SPA at the moment, which is true, but there is still LP12, which relates to cumulative impact in general, borough-wide. Shoreditch is a very busy area, and that's borne out in the cumulative impact report, the council's independent cumulative impact report. And paragraph 612 says the observations show that Friday and Saturday, the former SCIP or SPA area is extremely busy, at times very chaotic, and the triangle remains a central hub of the NT, retaining people drinking and on the street until 4 a.m. with options to eat until 5:30. Paragraph 618 says the observations nights confirm that Shoreditch is a mainstream NTE, possibly the largest in the UK, and there are similar numbers of venues, say the centre of Liverpool or Newcastle. And paragraph 619, in London terms, observation of Shoreditch is comparable in certain ways to the most intense hotspots of Westminster, Soho, or Camden Town. So if you combine that with what's been touched upon by everyone here, which is the reputation of the applicant, which is having 2 previous licenses revoked, it might be a new application, but a simple company's house search will show you it's the same individual as part of public record. So how can we be confident that the same issues won't happen again in an area that we know is so prone to the issues of cumulative impact in the area? And even though we've heard a lot from, you know, the applicant in terms of what they intend to do, frankly, Chair, we've heard that before as well. And we've heard it with more reduced hours and more serious conditions being accepted and presented, but then subsequently go on to fail. So comments again were made about the other venues that have been granted the licenses that we're well aware of. So in relation to all of those venues, the licensing operator did make representations. We came to agreement in relation to the Shoreditch, but the other 2 venues were determined by licensing subcommittee. And we're quite clear in our representations that the history has shown that the applicant has struggled to manage this particular venue. We're well aware that they operate other venues in the area, but history has shown that when it comes to this particular premises, issues have occurred on more than one occasion, and therefore we don't have the confidence that we feel is required to say that we support the application. And nothing further to add, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Molinari.
Thank you, Chair. You've heard a lot about the evidence and the impacts. I'm going to focus just on a few narrow points of law to help ease your decision making. The first sort of issue of law is the relevance of the previous revocations and the issues that were occurring at the operator's previous nightclubs on this space, and the extent to which you can think about that and weigh that in your decision. Now, normally when we're dealing with a new premises application, it's kind of difficult because it's a new premises, so there's no history, there's nothing we can look to. We can't say, you know, this is evidence as to how this is going to operate. You have to speculate a lot and you have to guess a lot about the kind of operator you have before you. So fortunately, in this situation, you have the unusual situation where you've actually had two very similar premises run in the exact same place by the exact same operator and the exact same kind of business model. You have clear evidence from those occasions of what happens when this person runs that kind of premises in this location. And I'm not going to talk about the evidence because you've heard so much from the residents about the impact it had on them, but it was an extraordinary impact. It was a severe impact. We know what happened in the past, and that can inform your speculations and your view about how things are going to go in the future. You are entitled to look at the evidence, the historic evidence, in that way. Frankly, it would be bizarre if you didn't look at the historical evidence in that way. You know, no matter what my learned friend Mr. Dads tries to tell you about the law does not require you to shut your eyes and ears to clear evidence. It does not require you to abandon common sense. If the same operator has been running a premises in an awful way twice in the same location, it stands to good reason that he's probably going to behave poorly again. And if he's caused this kind of impact on people's lives previously, running the same kind of operation twice, it's good reason to think there'll be bad impacts again. You are allowed to think about that as a matter of law. Second question is it going to be a nightclub? And I want to address the conditions that have been agreed and the conditions that haven't been agreed, because in our view, the sum total of these conditions that have been agreed would entirely allow this premises to be a nightclub. The first thing to say is this condition that they did agree to, which was by condition, this will not be a nightclub. That is not enforceable, Chair. If you put that on the license, just like it happened last time, that will get taken off the license or will be appealed. So nightclub does not have a definition in law. An enforcement officer from the council can't go to this premises and say, today it's a nightclub. They won't be able to define that. It won't work. So they're happy with that condition to be on the license because it won't be enforceable. And because it's not enforceable, it could still be a nightclub. Now, what did they not agree to, quite tellingly? They didn't agree to not having a DJ, which would have put a big step towards this not being a nightclub. They definitely want to keep a DJ. They wouldn't accept core hours. They accepted 2:30 at the latest. Again, if they'd accepted core hours or something actually approaching that, they would suggest this isn't a nightclub, but they won't do that because they want to run a nightclub. They told you that they'd have a condition saying no external promoters. That's not relevant. I mean, not having an external promoter, loads of nightclubs, a great many nightclubs have that condition. It just means that you can't have someone come in and run the venue for you, but you can still host nightclub nights yourself. So the sum total of the conditions that have been proposed that they've agreed to would absolutely allow a nightclub. And you have to confront that committee. When you go and make your decision, you have to confront the fact that when you grant this, what you're granting is a license that will allow 550-person nightclub to operate in this space. You can make that decision, but you have to confront the reality of that kind of decision, kind of impacts that will have on people's lives. And the final point I was going to address is about cumulative impacts, which the licensing authority has dealt with as well, so I'll just be brief. But when you read the policy, it does make clear that there are serious issues still in 2023, when this report was done, around Rivington Street, and this was after cargo closed. So the situation post-cargo was still bad. And Rivington Street itself is mentioned 24 times in the cumulative impact report. It is repeatedly referenced as a serious hotspot. That whole area of Shoreditch is repeatedly referenced as a serious hotspot. It's mentioned variously that it's a place where people do pre-drinking, where they do nitrous oxide, where there are huge crowds, where there always has to be a really big police presence. So it is not true to say that things are calm there. And even if things were calm there, even if there was no crime, even if it was lovely now, it just brings me back to what one of the gentlemen on the screen said, which is that, you know, you close this nightclub, things get really nice. The logic can't be that let's open the nightclub again because things are nice now and let's make them worse. That is not rational, it's not reasonable. So for all those reasons, the police firmly opposes this application. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Dance.
Chair, I tried to wrap up everything because there's been some new comments. I need to address those. I'll be as succinct as possible.
Fair enough.
I think we have to be careful about how we interpret some of the information that's given, and I'm going to correct some of it. So, for example, my learned friend talks about the number of matters arised. So, for example, in the page or paragraph 565 of the cumulative impact document, I think he was referring to, residents raise issues about car bars, preloading, street drinking, street urination, antisocial behaviour, noise, knocks and drugs. And that was a general survey undertaken. But actually, the police, when provided the data for 14 months, there were no arrests regarding car bars. There's no evidence before Environment Health about that. Preloading comments were mainly around off licenses, people buying beforehand or buying, can't afford to go out, but then hanging around the streets. In addition to that, there was no fixed penalties or notices within the evidence for street urination or drinking. In relation to the knocks, there is one on the 7th of September, 13th of December, 30th of November, 2 knocks and cannabis. There are only 4 matters. Those 4 matters form from the analysis given by the police of Rivington Street, which, as I say, between 2 and 3:30 are only 11 in 14 months. We need to look at the evidence and actually the evidence that's been collected. In addition to that, a lot of those matters at paragraph 570 set out that actually a lot of those issues are non-nighttime economy customers, young people or people without funds, or other people around selling knocks, people using late night refreshment, and people using their cars to gather around and hang around. Basically, having a presence, we say, in our premises being open will actually help, because there are some comments about the archway. When it's closed, people might hang around. So actually a presence will assist. In relation to the comments regarding the same points of the reports and not cherry picking, it is very clear that at paragraph 625, it says there are a number of large visitors to the nighttime economy who are not paying customers. Who are not customers of the late night economy, using public areas, outdoor spaces, and hanging around. So that was a comment regarding 4 or 5 o'clock. People not actually, there's some people hanging around, but not even been into some venues. So, and that was around the area. They say and I've referred to it earlier on, that there's been a huge change in the way the nighttime economy is in Shoreditch. There's a significant rise in restaurants, and the sort of the culture that made it quite popular and attractive is somewhat 20 years ago. That heyday is past. In regards to some of the comments made by residents overall, I'd like to say this. Firstly, looking at public safety in the building is an appropriate building to be licensed. In relation to public nuisance, we've demonstrated with evidence, I believe, that inside activities will not affect residents living nearby. And that's supported by no objection from Environmental Health. And I've provided the diagram. Now, it's really important, Chair, in relation to the representations. There was a public consultation, 28 days, public notices. And during the 28 days, actually, during the 25 days, there were no representations. I'll come about the last 3 days in a moment. But no representations made within, or only one mentioning Rivington Street, but we've been told by officers there's not one in that area. Now, we've been told by one resident he falls within that area. But so you have to, we've got 117 objections, most of them fall outside, 116 fall outside of that area, and talking about Chicago's or dispersal and the like. And you'll have to weigh that up about actually what is actually happening. So there is a rule of finality. If I tell you something constantly, or someone you hear from 117 people or 50 people, it doesn't make it any more true, or it doesn't make it any more acceptable or unacceptable. It's not a numbers game. We're looking at the evidence. So in relation to the inside the venue and that circle I've mentioned, now away and outside, which residents have raised, I do have empathy. People do return to vehicles, etc. But we've been running the Shoreditch, which is on the Shoreditch High Street, capacity of 350. We've been running that premises without any cause of concern. And actually the residents support that the different venues around there are not causing them any trouble. And we're one of those, and we're one of those operating. But the law says, and that's the point, we can't be held responsible for people away from our premises. As a matter of law, you can't refuse our license based on that. That would be wrong, because obviously once people move outside and away, they have to be a law-abiding in their own right, and that's why we pay our taxes to make sure there's policing and people behave in a law-abiding way. And you wouldn't stop a lawful business from operating. It's like if they go to McDonald's or they go, you know, and they go away and chuck litter down the road, you don't close the McDonald's. Actually, the littering is the person that has done that act. You have to deal with those individuals. I do have sympathy, of course. If someone comes back and disturbs a neighbour or disturbs a member of the community, it's not great. I understand that. But we as a premises can't be held responsible for people away from the premises. And in relation to cumulative impact, there is an cumulative impact policy. So the burden's on us and the burden is on those making the representations. And they would have to demonstrate that the people coming from, that they're being disturbed from, are actually from our premises going forward. They may have done in the past cargoes, I accept that, but in relation to here, they would have to say, well, your venue is having that impact. So I walked around that area. Sorry, I keep saying so, I think I'm in court. Councillor, the position is, as I've walked away, it is a significant distance. Now, in relation to public nuisance, I'll add, as I say, that there are conditions that deal with noise limiter, signs, posters, etc. And we do know that there is evidence that footfall has reduced dramatically, crime has fallen dramatically, the police statistics show crime has fallen dramatically. We know Hackney Knights have reported crime has fallen dramatically. So the reality of it is that from the crime and disorder objective, the police have only provided evidence of 11 matters between 2 and 3:30 over 14 months. There is no cumulative impact. There's no other evidence before you. In relation to this point about trust, and I said I would cover it later on, in the representations from the police, they never mention trust, and they don't mention that at all. It's the first time tonight, and I don't think that's acceptable, Chair. That's not an amplification, that's a new ground, and we would have challenged that in papers and documents, and I think it's poor show to mention it tonight, and mention it many times so everyone else picks it up. And Mr. Khan, it's unacceptable to be, in effect, defaming him in public in this way by the police service, and I think it's not acceptable. In relation to what Louise says, well, we want it both ways. No, I don't, actually. There's a difference. There's an acceptance, and I haven't challenged cargo. I haven't challenged what the residents have said. But there is a difference between then and now, which is a passage of time. And that passage of time is different. And also the environment has changed. The whole scene has changed. We are coming with you with this application as a new applicant, with saying that we are running it as a bar, and we already run 3 premises very nearby very well as bars, and one of them is 350. So we say, actually, through passage of time, with the existing businesses we have, and the police have already confirmed that they have a good working relationship with us. They've confirmed it. So all this about trust, I think it's throwing mud and hoping it sticks. And sir, I would ask you, look at the evidence and look at what was put before you in writing in advance, and not and discount that submission. If you're not with me and trust is an issue, and you decide that trust is an issue, then put that in your reasons, because obviously we will challenge that because we don't think that is right. And I'm not being rude, but I'm just saying we don't like that. In relation to the issue around protection children from harm, we've not had any matters arising with that. I'd like to say this, on picking up a few points of the residents. There are transport links. It's well, there is connectivity. There is the Liverpool Street, Shoreditch Old Street. There's plenty of Hackney carriage and private hire facilities. Things change now. Most people get Ubers or public transport. The police say about history. We've had history of the past, but there's also history, I would say, of us running successfully bars. There is lots of history of that. And how confident will we, how can we have confidence it won't happen again? Well, we've got our existing premises, our existing businesses. Time has passed. With time has got to be, in effect, an e-healer. I know that the residents say, in effect, you know, hell can freeze over. We wouldn't get a license from the residents. I get that feeling. And that the residents do not, and they say him. They say him with a raised voice. Well, that's personal. We're not here for personalities. That shouldn't be allowed to happen. We are looking at, actually, we do run existing premises exceptionally well, and we will run this well. In relation to door supervisors, it's not just left to a risk assessment. You know, there's conditions within the application, condition 3, 4, and 5 deal with that. Just a few more points. And that deals with that. I say that licensing objectives can be met and can be promoted. I would ask that this application, on its merits, with the conditions, with the submissions, and based on evidence, can be granted to 2:30, 3 o'clock, and will promote the licence objectives going forward. Thank you, councillors, for listening to me.
Chair, just, I'm very sorry to extend anything else, but there was a significant factual error.
Sorry, it's a point of factual clarification.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can take a point of factual clarification.
So, yeah. So Mr. Dowds has repeatedly said, and just there as well, the police have never raised this issue of a lack of confidence or trust in the management of the venue. Yeah, and the representation. So if I take you to page 52 of your bundle, penultimate paragraph, this only sought to reinforce the police's lack of confidence in the management of this venue, applied for another review of this license. That's after explaining all the things that happened with the previous venues. And then again, page 53, police, the third paragraph in the bottom, police views have not changed with regards to the management of this venue. That is clear enough that we are raising that as an issue. We couldn't really put it more clearly than that.
Thank you. The word trust, though, is not in your representation.
There's a point of trust. We don't trust the management of this venue. Our views are the management is incompetent.
Yeah, you're quite right, Mr. Dowds. The word trust itself does not turn up, but Mr. Molinari is quite right that having no confidence implies not having trust. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you. Colleagues, happy to tell everyone they can go away and we'll take a decision?
Yep.
Yep, got everything you need. I'm going to conclude that hearing and say thank you very much, everyone, for your patience. Can I just say one thing? Yes, there are no 10s. So can I just say one thing? Many of us are being paid or getting an allowance to be here. Many of us are not. And I'm speaking to those online and those in the chamber. And thank you for giving so much of your time. It is appreciated and noted and on record. Thank you.
If you could stop the live stream, please.